Chapter 76. Look at how much you've grown. Squealing in delight from the moment her eyes landed on me, Samantha Dover, my now mother, lunged at me as soon as the door opened. Without having enough time to avoid her, I fell into her embrace. Oh, after a couple of seconds of struggling, I gave up. Oddly enough, I didn't feel repulsed by her hugging. Feeling the warm embrace of my mother, I felt my body grow weak. My mind relaxed. It was an odd yet familiar feeling. It was nice. Let me get a better look at you. After a solid minute, she released me from her hug. Squishing my cheeks with both hands, my mother looked at me with a large smile on her face. Look at how much more handsome you've become. I'm sure every girl in the academy is swooning over your looks. Nodding my head, my mouth twitched. If only that were true. Out of all my stats, only charm refused to increase. What more handsome? Glancing around and feeling the nightly breeze, my mother quickly pulled me into the house. Oh dear, it's better if you come in. We don't want you getting a cold, do we? Yeah. Clank. Closing the door behind me, I entered the house. Taking off my shoes and hanging my coat, I quickly followed her deeper into the house. As I walked, I couldn't help but glance at all of the photos hanging on the wall. There was a wide variety of photos on the walls. These included photos of the previous Ren, my now parents, and some group photos of my parents with people whom I presumed were from their guild. They looked especially happy in the photo, and I didn't understand why they would want to screw them over like that. Turning left of the corridor, I was soon inside of the living room. As I stepped into the living room, my eyes immediately landed on a certain individual. So that's Ronald Dover, my father. Sitting on the sofa looking through some papers, Ronald Dover, my now father, glanced in my direction. Nodding in my direction, he said, "Welcome back." Ah, yes. Dumbly staring at Ronald, my father, those were the words that came out of my mouth. Aside from my eyes, he was a spitting image of the current me. His facial features were identical to mine. Coupled with his jet black hair, he looked like an older version of me. However, if I had to point out the difference between us, it would be the fact that his face lacked the childish, immature nature that I possessed. His demeanor was a stark contrast from mine, as he looked extremely solemn and serious. "Oh, come on, Ren, don't be shy. Sit next to me." Sitting next to my father, my mother quickly urged me to sit next to her. After hesitating for a split second, under her pressuring stare, I could only obediently sit next to her. After I sat down, tugging her husband's sleeves to make sure he was paying attention, she looked at me and said, "So, tell us how your first semester at your academy was?" Pausing for a second to gather my thoughts, I stared at both of them and started speaking. Well, how do I start? And so I started recounting what had happened to me during my academic stay in the lock. I intentionally left out things such as going to the black market and taking the seat of limit and stuff. When the conversation shifted towards the Hallberg incident, well, let's just say things didn't end well as my mom cursed a lot. I remember her texting me a lot during that time. Fortunately, I reassured her that I was fine. If not, I wouldn't be surprised if she suddenly packed up her stuff and went to Hallberg. As I talked, I was slightly uncomfortable at first, but the more I talked, the more at ease I felt. It felt as if this was one of the many talks I had with them over the years. It felt strangely nostalgic and familiar, which was a very odd feeling. As I was talking, from what I observed, my now father, Ronald Dover, although he looked cold on the exterior, he was quite warm. He wasn't a man of many words like my mother, but from time to time he would occasionally join the conversation to add his input. Although it didn't look like much, his little inputs would always keep the conversation going, and the room was soon enveloped in a harmonious atmosphere. This warmth, Peta. Feeling hot tears streaming down my cheeks, I froze for a second before quickly wiping them away from my face. Ah, sorry. I don't know what got over me. Seeing me cry, my mom immediately lunged in my direction and took me in her embrace. Ah, I know you've been through a lot. Here, you can cry in your mama's arms. Feeling myself in her warm arms, for a split second my mind blanked. Soon after, as if a dam had broke, tears burst down from my cheeks. Sent into a different world where everything was different, and having spent the last 2 months by myself, with no one to rely on but myself, her warm words and embrace caused hidden feelings that were within me to surge. My father soon also joined the hug, and I soon found myself buried beneath the both of them. All right, stop, I'm fine now. After a couple of minutes, after I calmed down, I was able to free myself from their embrace. Fixing my clothes which were now a mess, I tried to switch the topic. So that's all for what happened. How's the guild doing? Brightly smiling, making eye contact with her husband for a second, my mother said, "Everything is perfect. Apart from the fact that we have to put in some extra hours here and there, everything is going well." Looking at them for a second, I smiled and leaned back on the sofa. "Is that so? I'm glad you're doing fine then." Liars. I already knew everything. A part of me felt a little bitter at the fact that they still hid their troubles from me, but I sort of understood where they were coming from. They didn't want their problems to affect me, and rightfully so. Why would they want their child who was studying at the best academy in the human domain to feel pressured? All they wanted was for their son to study happily, while they support him from the back. Disrupting our conversation was the sound of small footsteps. Gingerly walking into the living room, a small girl wearing oversized pajamas and a large teddy bear on her right hand drowsily rubbed her little eyes. She had smooth black hair that fell all the way to her tummy, and her eyes that were a similar shade of blue to my eyes hazily, looked at her teddy in her arms. Her rosy plump cheeks that had a small blush to them made anyone who was near her want to squeeze them tightly. Even I, as I watched her enter the room, had an urge to squeeze those cheeks. Looking up in my direction, tilting her little head, the young girl said, "Big brother?" Freezing on the spot, my eyes stared at the young girl that had entered the room. "So that's my sister Nola." Looking at the small girl that I had just entered the room, I instantly realized that she was supposed to be my 2-year-old sister, Nola. "Brother?" Calling for me for a second time, Nola extended her arms in my direction. "How cute." Smiling at Nola, my mother looked at Nola before looking back in my direction. "Nola tried her best to stay awake just to wait for you." Picking up Nola, my mother walked in my direction and handed her to me. After hesitating for a second, supporting her from her little bottom, I held Nola in my arms. Hooking her little arms around my neck, Nola's face brightened up as she closed her eyes and immediately fell asleep. Feeling her breathing even on my neck, I could only stand rooted on the spot. I didn't move because I was afraid of waking her up. My eyes darted towards my parents asking for help, but I was only met with their smiling faces. What was I supposed to do now? I was a loner back in my previous world. I never interacted with kids, nor did I have any. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. But strangely, I didn't dislike this feeling. As I held Nola in my arms, a strange protective feeling welled inside of me. It felt as if nothing would stop me from protecting this child in my arms. Taking a better look at Nola, who was innocently sleeping in my arms, I realized that even without the old Ren's emotions affecting me, I would do anything to protect her. After holding Nola for 5 more minutes, my mom stood up and took back Nola from my arms. "All right, give Nola back to me. You must be tired, go to sleep." Soon she sent me to my room, to which I happily agreed, as I was indeed feeling tired. Walking upstairs, I entered what seemed to be my room. It was a decently sized room that was similar in size to my room in the lock. However, compared to the lackluster decorations back in the lock, this room was filled with posters and magazines as well as other decorations. Glancing around the room, I sat on the bed in the corner of the room and took a deep breath. Although it was my first time here, it did not feel unfamiliar. It was a strange feeling. It was a different feeling from when I was back in the lock, and I felt more at peace here. It seemed that this body remembered this place well. Standing up and looking through the shelves of the room, I saw a picture of the previous Ren with his parents. Taking the photo frame to get a better look at the image, I saw him holding a bouquet of flowers smiling alongside his parents in front of the academy. Pang. However, as soon as I held onto that picture, I felt my heart sting for a split second. Flinching slightly, I almost dropped the frame on the ground. Frowning, I took a better look at the picture, and there I saw it. No, I could feel it. Beneath Ren's smile in the photo hid deep sadness and anguish. "Just what happened to you? What caused you to be that way?" Smack. "Get yourself together." There was no point in investigating what had happened to the previous Ren now. I believe that by the end of the month I would be able to discover what had happened to Ren and resolve his regrets. Perhaps this was the only way his emotions would leave my body, and I would finally have this body to myself. I wasn't really sure, but he at least deserved that much. For having given me a second chance as well as given me a happy and warm family, resolving his regrets was something I needed to do. Staring at the white ceiling of the room, I bitterly smiled as I thought back of what I told myself moments before I entered the house. During that time, I had repeatedly told myself not to get overly attached to my parents in this world. I told myself that there was no point in getting attached to some random strangers that I had never met before. But who was I kidding? Remembering Nola's tender cheek resting on my shoulder just moments before, as well as my parents' warm faces as they consoled me, I already knew it was already too late for me to not get attached. Pomph. Slumping on the white mattress, I thought to myself, this feeling, it isn't so bad. Chapter 77. After waking up, I headed downstairs to the kitchen. The first thing I saw as soon as I entered the kitchen was a small note left on the table. Picking it up, I read through the contents. "Ren, if you're reading this, your mom and dad have already gone to work. Once you wake up, bring Nola to the park outside and enjoy your weekend. I've already sent you some money to your account for when you go out. At around 12 p.m. you should come down to the guild with Nola. After we are done sorting out some stuff, we will bring you guys to lunch. See you soon. Love, Mom and Dad." They're already at work, HA. I guess with everything that was going on in the guild, it wasn't strange for them to work on weekends too. Neatly folding the small note, I headed towards the dining table where warm dishes covered in a thin plastic film were already prepared. As I sat on the table, lifting the plastic film, the fragrance of the bacon and the eggs on the plate instantly invaded my nostrils. Without skipping a beat, I devoured everything that was on the plate. Delicious. After eating my fill, patting my now bloated belly, I checked the time on my watch. 6:45 a.m. It was still very early in the morning, and looking outside the window I could see the sun slowly brightening up the surroundings. Since I had nothing to do, I decided to train for a couple of hours before waking Nola up and bringing her to the park. Clank. Sliding the glass doors that led to the garden, the morning breeze instantly cooled my body. Walking in the garden, feeling the lush green grass tingling at my naked feet, I took a deep breath and took out my sword from my dimensional space. Phew. Releasing a long breath, a white glow slowly started emanating from my body, following which, with my sword, I drew 3 circles in the air. Boom. As I drew the circles, After each full circulation, a translucent ring wobbled in the air. After the first ring formed, closing my eyes I drew a second and a third. Boom. Right after the third ring formed, I once again closed my eyes and concentrated my mind. As I did, the circles slowly started revolving around my body. Swoosh. Pointing towards my right side, one of the rings flew in the direction of where I pointed. With my left hand, I pointed upwards and another ring flew upwards, in the direction of where I pointed. Like that, for half an hour, I continuously moved the rings around me. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After 2 minutes, whenever a ring would dissipate in the air, I would quickly create a new one and continue with what I was doing. After the Hallberg incident, I didn't stop training. In fact, as a way to get my mind off of things, I trained even harder than before. And because of that, my second sword art, Ring of Vindication, reached the minor realm of mastery. With the sword art reaching the minor realm of mastery, I could now freely control the rings I created. If I wanted to, I could make them revolve around me for as long as the ring could last. Even better, the rings could now withstand the full impact of ranked individuals without breaking. Even ranks would now have a hard time breaking the rings that I made, creating a perfect defense system. As far as rings went, as of right now I could comfortably control 3. I could do 4, but that would strain my head too much due to my lack of control over my mana. In the future, the more I mastered this technique, the more rings I could control. Moreover, the more I mastered the technique, the better the rings would get with gravitational pull and elemental discharge being effects I could add to the rings. This was a massive improvement in my strength, as now I wouldn't have to worry about needing to waste time to use the Keiki style. With the rings protecting me, I could quickly control them to protect me whenever I was readying myself to execute a movement from my main sword art. HAAA, 9 a.m. As white steam dissipated from my body, checking the time, I stretched my back and yawned. I guess it's about time to wake up Nola. I had been training nonstop for about 2 hours. Looking at my watch and seeing the time, I knew it was about time to wake up Nola. Heading back into the house, I first took a quick shower before entering Nola's room. Wouldn't want to make Nola smell my sweat. Creak. Opening the door of Nola's room, I tiptoed towards her cradle. Looking at her little body sleeping soundly with her teddy in her arms, I whispered lightly, "Hey Nola, it's time to wake up." After whispering a couple of more times to try to wake her up, poking her cheeks a couple of times, Nola's eyelids slowly opened. "Home brother?" "Yes, it's big brother Ren." Smiling, I picked her up from her cradle and brought her out of her room. Still groggy from having just woken up, Nola leaned on my shoulder and stared at the ground. Smiling, I brought her to the kitchen. Since I had to bring her to the park, I gave her a cup of milk for breakfast before dressing her up. After styling Nola's hair into 2 ponytails, I brought her towards the entrance of the house. "I'm done." "That's great." Putting on her shoes, wearing a one-piece dress decorated with flower patterns, Nola took my hand and followed me out of the house. "All right, let's go." Clank. Closing the door behind me, we soon left for the park. Arriving at the park, Nola's eyes immediately started shining with excitement. Looking at the park, I couldn't help but be impressed by how beautiful it was. As the sun brightly lit the park, in the middle of it was a large lake where swans and ducks happily swam on the surface of the water. Near the lake, a bunch of children were happily playing in the playground with their friends and parents. Whizzing through the air, the children happily screamed as their parents pushed them from behind. Glancing at Nola, whose eyes were glued on the playground, I bitterly shook my head and headed in that direction. The playground had many different things that children could play with. It had multiple swings, a large slide, and a castle which seemed to be the most popular attraction in the playground. Near the playground, spread out over the vibrant green grass, sitting on large covers, families could be seen basking under the sun and happily chatting with each other. "Wow, is that you, Ren?" As I was walking towards the playground with Nola, I suddenly heard someone call my name. Turning my head in the direction of where the sound came from, I soon spotted 2 individuals heading in my direction. On the left, a guy with dark hair and green eyes smiled as he looked in my direction. On his ears were a couple of earrings, and coupled with his white designer t-shirt and tight black pants, I could immediately tell that whoever he was, he came from a relatively prominent family. "Haha, it is you. How long has it been?" Seeing me turn around and confirming that I was indeed the person he was looking for, the youth's smile deepened. Glancing next to him, the long-haired youth pointed towards me as he nudged his friend with his elbow. "Get a hold of this, Greg, it's Ren." Indifferently nodding, wearing long jeans, a red sweater, and a black cap, a relatively muscular and tall individual slowly walked in my direction. Staring at the 2 individuals making their way towards my direction, tilting my head to the side, I frowned. Who were they? Were they perhaps the old Ren's friends? Judging from how friendly they were, I assumed they were, but why did my heart feel a slight sense of repulsion and disgust? Just as I was pondering over the feeling I was having in my heart, hooking his arm around my neck, the long-haired youth happily said, "How are ya doing?" "I'm doin'." Right before I could finish my sentence, exerting the strength equivalent to a ranked individual, the long-haired youth whispered in my ear, "Listen carefully, little shit. Didn't I tell you before to never appear in this area again?" Taken aback by his sudden change in attitude, I was left speechless for a second. "What? Don't tell me you forgot." Staring at my reaction and misunderstanding it for something else, the long-haired youth strengthened his grip on my neck before saying, "Well, it looks like we might have to teach you a lesson." Looking at Nola, who was holding my hand, I let out a long breath before saying, Phew, wait, not here. Raising his brow, the long-haired youth smirked and mockingly said, "What makes you think you can decide what we do?" Glaring at him, I looked at Nola and reminded them that I wasn't alone. "Can't you see I'm with my little sister?" Noticing my sister, clicking his tongue, the long-haired youth removed his hand from my neck before smirking. "I see, you don't want to look bad in front of your sister, right? We sure hope nothing happens to her, ha ha ha." Ignoring his last words, bending down towards Nola, I looked at her in the eyes before saying, "Nola, can you do me a favor?" Curiously looking at the two people that had come, Nola looked back at me and nodded her head, Seeing her nod her little head, I smiled and took out my phone. Pointing towards a nearby bench, I said, "Here, take my phone and go sit on that bench over there." Looking at the phone, Nola shook her head. "Nana wants to be with Big Brother. How about this? After I come back I will buy you whatever ice cream or candy you want." "Really?" "Yes, Nodding her head enthusiastically, Nola ran to the bench I previously pointed at and sat down. Seeing how enthusiastic and obedient she became as soon as I bribed her, I couldn't help but bitterly smile. Kids were sure easy. "All right, let's go." After making sure Nola was fine, I looked at my two friends and smiled. Hee, it's been a while since we haven't seen each other. Don't worry, for the sake of your sister we will make this short. Once again hooking his arm around my neck, the black-haired youth nudged his friend, Greg, to follow him. Walking towards a more secluded area of the park, whilst still making sure that Nola was in my sights, the smile on my face slowly faded away. It's been a while since I had been this pissed. To think I was now being picked on by a bunch of extras that didn't even appear in the story. It was understandable if it was the lock, but this wasn't. I didn't need to hide my strength here, especially if it was against some extras that never appeared in the story. In fact, I was tired of remaining passive. If this was the lock, things may have been different, but now, Voom. What? How? Right after making sure no one was looking, releasing my ranked pressure, both individuals felt a massive pressure envelop them. Bam, bam, Kyo, Kuka, heavily punching them both in the stomach, kneeling down. A green acidic substance escaped from both of their mouths as their faces became white as paper. The only reason they even made it this far was because I let them. Judging from how they knew me, this was a good chance for me to find more about what the old Ren's life used to be like. However, since they pissed me off, it was about time I let them know their place. Cracking my neck, I bent down and looked at them in the eyes. Let's make this quick. Chapter 78. I'm done, Nola. Come here. Smiling, I waved at Nola in the distance and urged her to come to me. Nodding her little head, putting the phone away, Nola ran in my direction. Up, lifting her into my arms, I smiled and pointed towards the playground in the distance. Let's go play. Yes. Walking towards the playground, although I was smiling, that was merely a facade I put on since Nola was with me. My mind was in a current state of turmoil. After politely conversing with the two individuals, I found out a few things. First off, the long-haired guy's name was Simon Perk, and his father was a relatively influential person inside of a bronze-graded guild. The guy next to him was called Greg Topaz, and he was his childhood friend as well as bodyguard. The reason why they knew me was because the old Ren and they used to attend the same middle school. Fermine Middle School. It was one of the top middle schools in the Northern District. However, from what I've uncovered from my talk, the previous Ren Dover was a social outcast. It wasn't like this before, but after a series of events, he became an outcast. This probably happened right after he got accepted into the lock. Although I wasn't able to get a clear picture of what had happened since they weren't part of Ren's class, I was able to deduce that an important event had happened in Fermine Middle School, which was enough of a start for me. I at least had a direction to focus on now. Brother, as I was busy pondering over the old Ren's matters, feeling a light tug on my pants, I saw Nola's droopy eyes staring at my shoes. Are you tired already? Nodding her head, Nola extended her hands in my direction. 11:20 a.m. It should be time anyways. Checking the time, I picked Nola up from the ground and left the park. It was about time I headed to the guild. I wonder what it's like being in a guild. It should be this one. Arriving in front of a large skyscraper that was about 200 meters in height and had about 80 floors, I brought Nola inside of the building with me. From what I had been told by my parents, the whole building was used as the base for their guild, Galzacus. Although they didn't own the building, they managed to rent it out for a reasonable monthly price. Arriving in front of the elevators at the entrance of the building, I pressed the button and called for one. As I waited for the elevator to arrive, I took a quick glance at my surroundings. Surrounded by glass, the interior of the bottom floor was brightly lit by the sun in the sky. White marble floor covered the entire pavement, and people moving to and fro inside of the building was a constant sight. It looked extremely busy. Ding. Entering the elevator and pressing on the 25th floor button, the elevator doors closed and a slight pushing sensation appeared beneath my feet. Ding. In a matter of seconds, the elevator reached the 25th floor, and the doors slid sideways. Clank. Wow. As soon as the elevator doors opened, a whole different world appeared before my eyes. The 25th floor looked like a luxurious office space. The floor was extremely large, with a space that could accommodate over hundreds of people at a time. The area I was currently in was the main reception area of the guild. The higher floors were office spaces for administrative management, and the lower floors were for heroes, as they provided training facilities and other things heroes required, like a potion station, and supply replenishment areas. The ground was covered in a red carpet, and large TV screens were installed in the corner of the space with constant updates on the news, and which dungeons were available for raids. People wearing combat suits followed by people wearing formal ones appeared everywhere. Most likely, they were the members of the guild being followed by their managers. Looking at the scenery before me, I couldn't help but be amazed. So this was my parents' guild, Galzacus. Ren. Snapping me out of my reverie was the cheerful sound of my mom's voice. Ren, you're just in time. However, freezing mid-sentence, my mother's eyes landed on Nola, who was standing next to me. The more she looked, the grimmer her face became. Ren, glancing back at me, her eyes became cold, and her previous cheerful demeanor disappeared. Taken aback by her sudden shift in attitude, I didn't know what to do as cold sweat suddenly appeared on my back. What happened? Why does it look as if a demon had suddenly appeared behind my mother? Something wasn't right. What's wrong? Are you telling me that you can't tell what you've done wrong? What I did wrong? Frowning, I recalled everything that had happened today. Apart from taking Nola to the park and beating a couple of kids, I don't think there was anything to warrant a reaction. Why was she so angry? Sigh. Seeing how clueless I was, pointing towards Nola, her tone raised a few pitches. Just look at the state Nola is in. Nola. Glancing at Nola in confusion, I didn't see anything wrong with her. Apart from the fact that both her pockets were filled with candy, and she was holding an ice cream cone in each hand, I didn't see anything strange. Oh my god, what kind of son did I raise? Helplessly shaking her head, my mom went to Nola and, apart from one ice cream, she immediately took everything from her. Nola did try to protest, but under a mother's seriousness, she could only turn her head in my direction, to which I could only avoid, and pretend to feign ignorance. I'm sorry. After putting away all of the candy, Samantha, my mother, took Nola by her hand and urged me to follow her. All right, forget it. Follow me up to meet your dad. Okay. Just as I was about to follow my mother up, the whole floor became quiet before suddenly everyone started panicking. He's here. Everyone get ready. Stopping whatever they were doing, crowding towards the elevator, a bunch of guild members bowed down. Clank. As the elevator doors opened, exiting them was the vice guild leader of the Galzacus Guild, Martin Lorwick. His shoulder-length hair was curved up slightly, and he had a well-trimmed black beard that nicely fitted around his jaw. The solemnity given off by his extraordinary appearance was similar to that of my father, as every step he would take caused all the guild members near him to shake in their boots. Hugh. Looking around the room with his snake-like eyes, the vice guild master of the Galzacus Guild, Martin Lorwick, murmured quietly, "This guild is going to the shitters." His voice, which was deep, was loud enough for most people around him to hear. With a moderate arrogance and a lethargic attitude, Martin Lorwick pushed back the people flocking in his direction. Staring at him in the distance, my eyes narrowed into slits as I closely scrutinized him. According to the reports that Small Snake sent me, he was the man leading the inner conflicts within the guild. He was a D-ranked hero, just slightly weaker than my father, and was selected by the guild investors to become the vice director of the guild. With the aid of the board of directors, he managed to convince them into overthrowing the current guild leader, my father. As I closely scrutinized Martin, another wave of murmurs engulfed the entire floor as a youth walked out from behind him. The youth was wearing a white-colored, long-sleeved loosely fit t-shirt, with a strange insignia sewn on the back of it. His black obsidian eyes, which were brighter than ordinary people's, had hints of wisdom hidden deep within them. The youth's face was quite handsome and outstanding, with his skin being smooth without any imperfections. His long black-colored hair dangled to his shoulders, and his demeanor carried hints of arrogance and pride. As he followed Martin from behind, with his back straight, he would look down on everyone present in the room, almost as if he owned the place. As Martin and the youth were walking, Martin's eyes suddenly drifted towards the other end of the hall where three individuals stood. A smirk soon emerged on his face. "Follow me, Alex." Plowing through the crowd of people, Martin and the youth named Alex soon stopped in front of me and my mother. Looking at my mother, Martin politely smiled and said, "It's a pleasure seeing you here, Samantha." Frowning, a trace of disgust appeared on my mother's face before it quickly disappeared as fast as it came. Smiling politely, she greeted him back. "Hello, Martin. It's been a long time since we've spoken to each other like." Soon they started conversing with each other. However, if someone wasn't paying close attention to their conversation, one wouldn't be able to notice all the hidden meanings behind each other's words. My husband indeed worked very hard to build the guild from the ground up, but of course, that was largely due to how much I was helping him. As my mom was conversing with Martin, the youth behind him walked up to me. Seizing me up, a smirk soon appeared on his face. "Are you the talentless waste who was able to attend the lock due to how their father stole from his own guild to pay for his son's tuition?" The moment I saw him, I just knew. I knew things were going to be like this. Smiling politely, I said, "If you're talking about the D-ranked talent student attending the lock, that would indeed be me. I just don't understand how someone like you could even manage to N." Just as Alex was about to finish his sentence, audible murmurs resounded the floor as the people around us started separating. Soon, with a presence that was even more domineering to that of Martin, my father arrived. Guildmaster, Guildmaster, morning, Guildmaster." Furrowing his brows, Martin quickly put on a big smile as he looked at Ronald. "Ah, Guildmaster, I was just catching up with Samantha." Nodding his head towards Martin, Ronald ignored him and looked at my mother. Seeing that everything was all right, he glanced in my direction. "Is this Ren?" Noticing my dad looking at me, Martin's eyes shined for a split second, before he immediately arrived beside me, and patted me on the shoulder. Haha, how long has it been since I saw you? By the way, have you? It seems like they've already met. Let me introduce him to you. Pointing towards Alex that was standing in front of me, Martin's tone carried hints of pride as he spoke. This here is Alex Cloudburn. He is currently attending Noward Academy, the best academy in the Northern District, and is a B-ranked talent I picked up. Whilst looking at my father, Martin's eyes paused slightly on me before emphasizing the B-ranked talent part, when he was introducing Alex. Looking at Alex, who didn't shy away from my father's eyes, my dad nodded his head and said, "That's indeed very good talent you have picked up." Smirking, Martin raised his hands in the air as the tone of his voice increased a few pitches. Good. Just good. We are talking about a B-ranked talent here, Ronald. Shaking his head in disappointment, Martin continued. I know your son enrolled in the lock, but with his talent, he's in a completely different world compared to Alex. Without giving a chance for my father to speak, glancing around him, in a voice that was audible enough for everyone to hear, Martin looked at my father and said, "Since you seem to be more impressed by your son more than Alex, how about we let our two kids spar? You know, just to show our members how much the prospects we've chosen have improved." Glancing around, I could instantly see the momentum of the conversation falling in Martin's direction. By not giving a chance for my father to speak, Martin carried the conversation to the point where it suddenly became a duel between me and Alex. His goal was obvious. If my father refused, his reputation would fall as it would make him seem like a coward. And if he accepted and I lost miserably, his reputation would also take a hit. Moreover, knowing the previous Ren, Martin judged that his plan was foolproof, hence why he acted fast. However, he miscalculated something. After a long silence, just as my father was about to refuse Martin's provocation, tugging his clothes, I firmly looked at him in the eyes and said, "Dad, accept." Ren do. Raising his hand to stop my mother from protesting, staring at me for a solid minute, my dad looked back at Martin for a couple of seconds before nodding. "Okay, we accept." Ha 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 ha, great, let's meet in the arena in half an hour's time. Laughing out loud, Martin took one last glance at us before waving and leaving with Alex. Right after Martin left, the crowd around us dispersed, leaving behind me and my family. Turning his attention towards me, Ronald Dover, my father, solemnly asked, "Are you sure?" Smiling, I nodded my head. Never been more sure. Chapter 79. Descending down the elevator, I quickly headed towards where the changing rooms were located. Suddenly, just as I was about to enter the changing room, an official guild member, wearing a black suit, stopped me. Frowning, pointing towards my name tag, I said in a somewhat disgruntled voice, "I'm the one participating in the fight, can't you see?" "Haha, it's not that. If you want to get changed you must head to another room." Pointing to my right, the man pointed at a pathway next to the main entrance. "Oh, thank you." Thanking the man, I walked in the direction he pointed at and soon arrived at my assigned waiting room 3. Entering the changing room, I walked in and sat down on a random seat. Phew. Letting out a long breath, I prepared my mind for what was to come. From what I've gathered, my opponent, Alex Cloudburn, was a spear user whose rank was F-, a rank lower than mine, meaning that I was stronger than him, at least stats-wise. Coming into this match, I decided that apart from using the keiki style, I would go all out, meaning that I was about to expose my rank. After thinking for a bit, I decided that pretending to be weak all the time wasn't something that would benefit me, at least not when I wasn't in the lock. There was no longer a need for me to stop myself from exposing a part of my abilities. It was fine to expose some of it, not all of it, but some of it. And that's exactly what I was planning. Recalling Alex's arrogant face as he looked at me in disgust, I was sure I wasn't going to pull any punches in our fight today. I made up my mind to absolutely destroy and humiliate him in front of everyone present. I needed to destroy Martin's rising momentum and give my father some breathing space. The only way to achieve this was through thoroughly beating the crap out of Alex. Beat him to the point where he would forever remember the humiliation. Fortunately for him, before the match was decided, I had told my dad to block people from taking videos or photos of the match, saving him from future humiliations. When I asked my dad for this request, he initially thought that it was because I was afraid of it spreading on the web, but my reason couldn't be any more different. I wanted to leave a bit of leeway for myself in case I would be forced to use the keiki style to win. If videos of our fight were to be exposed to the world to see, though unlikely, there was bound to be someone out there who would be able to recognize what sword art I practiced. Chances were that once exposed, my family would definitely be put in danger. Although I wasn't worried to the point I felt that I would need to use the keiki style for my current spar, I just wanted to reduce any chances of this coming back to bite me in the future. The guild's official arena was designed to be a more modern version of the Colosseum. The central arena was split into 3 squared platforms, while the stands started 10 meters above the platforms and could house more than 2,000 people. The design was extremely popular amongst the guild members as there would always be fights happening in the arena. Large TV screens stood at the top of the stadium, giving a clear picture of what was happening in the arenas for the spectators to see. Because the screens were controlled by the guild master, Ronald Dover, there was no need for him to worry about the footage being leaked. 10 minutes before the start of a duel, the guest seats were packed full of people. Because of the earlier warning by the guild master, photos and videos were prohibited from being taken during the match. Some assumed that it was because he didn't want videos of his son losing miserably to Alex to spread, whilst others thought it was because he didn't want people to find out about the internal struggles happening within the guild. Either way, no one was really against the idea of not being able to take photos or videos since they weren't expecting a decent match to begin with. Can Ren do it? Watching the battle arena from above, inside of a glass cube, a few individuals sat on large red sofas. Worriedly glancing towards the arena, Samantha Dover glanced at her husband and squeezed his hand tightly. I believe in him. Nodding his head, Ronald Dover too looked at the arena. However, even though he didn't show it outwardly, he too was extremely nervous. This fact was quickly picked up by his wife, who felt the grip on her hand tighten. Recalling his meeting with Alex 30 minutes ago, Ronald couldn't help but worry a bit. This is going to be a tough match for Ren. Humph. Sitting a few rows behind Ronald, Martin arrogantly looked at the arena below him as he sipped on some wine. Twirling the wine cup in his hands, Martin looked at Ronald before slowly saying, I hope your son can last long enough for this to actually be considered a match. Ignoring Martin's provocations, Ronald kept his eyes on the arena, causing Martin to clench his teeth in anger. Just you wait, you bastard. Just you wait until Alex absolutely destroys your son in front of the whole guild. I want to see if you can ignore me then. It's starting. Tisk. Seeing the lights around the stadium turn off, Martin crossed his arms and leaned against the back of the seat. From the way he was smiling, it was obvious that he was confident in Alex's chances of winning. The informal duel between the vice guild master and guild master was starting. Standing in the middle of the arena, a middle-aged man equipped with a headset and a microphone stared at the audience with a big smile on his face. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a duel between Vice Guild Master Representative Alex Clabram and the Guildmaster Representative as well as son, Ren Dover. Pausing slightly to keep the crowd in suspense, the host said, how will Ren Dover, who was rated as AD ranked talent, overcome Alex Clabram, who was listed as AB ranked talent? Isn't the result already obvious? Looking at the crowd, the host put on a confused expression as he said the last bit. However, his expression soon changed as he spoke with more enthusiasm. However, don't lose me just yet, crowd. Did you know that Ren Dover over here is also a student at the Lock? Yes, the most prestigious academy that there is. With all the information he had, the host tried his best to hype up the match as much as he could. And this was evidently achieved as the cheers around the stadium intensified. Soon, a translucent blue barrier covered the whole arena. The blue film, which was created out of mana, was made to prevent the shockwaves from the fights to leak out. This way, if things got out of hand, the spectators wouldn't be affected. Oh, I see, big brother. Pointing towards the arena, Nola couldn't help but shout as soon as she saw Ren's figure slowly walking into the arena. Come Nola, cheer for your brother. Nervously staring at Ren, who was walking out from the right passageway, Samantha Dover held Nola tightly in her arms and nervously bit her lips. Please be safe. Are you ready? Yes. Led by the staff, I walked up to the main arena stage. As soon as my foot stepped into the arena, the rumbustious cheers coming from the crowd instantly drowned out any other sound. The crowd roared. Just as I was about to get adjusted to the cheers, an even more boisterous round of cheers engulfed the entire arena, almost turning me deaf. Entering the arena after me, Alex waved at the crowd as he posed with his spear in his hand. His every pose and action would arouse more cheers and claps from the crowd. Ignoring him, I decided to look around me. First, I took a good look around the arena. A translucent mana barrier surrounded the arena, with thousands of spectators looking down. On a small podium next to the arena, a referee looked at his watch as he waited for me and Alex to get into positions. The more I took notice of my surroundings, the more I felt this indescribable pressure and excitement overwhelm me. It somehow filled me with energy. While I was shaking from this strange sensation, Alex walked up from the other side. Arriving in front of his designated location, he looked at me and said, you got lucky. With a puny talent like yours, you actually managed to enroll at the Lock, while I had to settle for the second best option. How is it that someone of your caliber can enter the academy and I can't? Without saying a word, I looked him straight in the eyes. Although his words had some truth to them, right now he was merely trying to shake my mentality. This was a common practice used when opponents faced each other in duels. Regardless of who your opponent was, a key component in increasing your chances of winning was to get into your opponent's head. If you managed to enter their head, the chances of you losing drastically reduced. A person's mentality was one of the most important things fighters needed to take into consideration before fighting. A person with a weak mentality would find it much harder to win compared to someone who remained rational throughout the whole fight. Counting down, 3. Glancing between me and Alex a couple of times, the host started counting down. Shing, shing. Scraping his spear on the ground, Alex smirked in my direction. 2. Igniting his mana, a red hue slowly started coating around Alex's body and his spear. In contrast, a white glow enveloped me. 1. Leaning forward, Alex shifted his center of gravity towards his right foot that had dug deep into the ground. Currently, the distance that separated me and Alex was about 10 meters. It was a distance Alex could close in just a few seconds. This meant that as soon as the match started, I had 3 seconds to either defend or counterattack whatever he was planning on doing. Gripping onto my sword, a trace of a smile appeared on my lips. I already knew what to do. Start. Chapter 80. As soon as the referee announced the start of the match, like a missile, Alex shot in my direction. A shockwave resounded across the arena as his figure disappeared from where he was standing. Moments before Alex shot in my direction, I tensed my calves. I moved backward and quickly drew a circle in the air. Just as the tip of Alex's spear was about to reach me, I motioned with my fingers upwards. The ring I created moved right in front of the spear. Caught off guard, Alex's arms, which were still holding onto the spear tightly, flung in the air. The spear clashed against the ring, disrupting its momentum. His body became wide open. Capitalizing on the opening, I did not skip a beat. Using the scabbard of the sword, I hit him in the face, and the sound of something breaking resounded across the arena. Quaya. Taking 10 steps back, Alex opened his eyes wide as his hands held onto his nose. Soon, red droplets fell onto the pavement of the arena. Taking a moment to process what had happened, Alex looked at the ground for a moment before screaming with bloodshot eyes. "How dare you!" Soon, a thick pressure started emanating from his body, surrounding the whole arena. Noticing the changes happening around me, I rubbed my chin and stared at Alex. The red hue surrounding his body had become thicker and stronger than before. He was finally starting to take me seriously. Licking my lips lightly, I raised my hand and provocatively beckoned at him. "Come." In the stands, watching the spectacle unfold before their eyes, Ronald and Samantha Dover were pleasantly surprised by their son's performance. Although the match had only just started, from the way things were going, Ren seemed to be having the upper hand. "Oh my god, since when did Ren become so strong?" Covering her mouth to hide her shock, Samantha looked at her husband. Although he seemed to have had no significant change in expression, he was shocked, as his hands shook as soon as Ren hit Alex in the face. "He is definitely stronger. Humph, he just got lucky." Martin, who was a few rows behind them, snorted. However, although he said that, his face was grim. Sitting up on his chair, his eyes remained glued to the arena. Alex must have underestimated his opponent. There is no way such a mistake would happen again. He just could not believe that Alex, a talent that he had spent countless resources on to convince him to join him, was currently losing to Ren. Someone evaluated as AD ranked talent could not possibly beat Alex, who was evaluated at B rank. It just was not possible. True to his predictions, the fight began to lean in Alex's direction as soon as he released his full power. From then on, Alex was on the attack, whilst Ren was on the defense. Secretly sighing in relief, Martin leaned back on his chair and looked at Ronald. "See, what did I tell you? He was just lucky." Alex's spearmanship was truly domineering and vicious. With each swing, he directly aimed for my heart and head. This forced me to switch focus so that I could constantly defend myself from his attacks. Using the spear's long reach, he constantly cut, smacked, and stabbed in my direction. To the spectators, rather than a duel, this was more like Alex viciously attacking me with everything he had. Circling the rings around me, I would constantly move them towards where Alex was attacking, repeatedly blocking his every attack. Soon, the sounds of Alex's spear clashing against my rings repeatedly reverberated across the arena. The crowd's booing followed suit. "Do something. Fight back. This is so boring." As if everything went from one ear to the other, I kept defending. Although it looked like I was struggling, I really was not. Since I decided to hide my main sword art, I used this time to get familiar with my second sword art, the Ring of Vindication. What better way than through real combat? "Stop hiding like a rat and fight, you pussy." Annoyed, noticing that things were currently going nowhere, Alex screamed as he fiercely stabbed the spear in my direction. "Just do something. Damn it." As Alex hacked with more power, and with greater speeds, I continuously matched his tempo and redirected the rings around me accordingly. Whenever I noticed that a ring was about to break, I would instantly create a new one. This endless cycle repeated a couple of times before Alex stopped attacking. "Hew." Taking a deep breath, Alex stopped whatever he was doing and clenched his teeth hard. "What's wrong? Tired already?" Seeing Alex distancing himself from me, I immediately taunted. However, this time, he ignored me. Licking his dried lips, Alex's grip on his spear increased. He was trying his best to calm himself down and come up with an appropriate strategy. Calm down. Let us think things through. This bastard is like a turtle. No matter how much power I put into my attacks, he always blocks them with his strange rings. Especially when he stacks them together. Once he does that, breaking his defenses becomes impossible. Damn it, what should I do? Glancing around the arena for anything that could help him, he soon took a look at the ground and finally noticed something. Holes with the imprints of his solace appeared all over the floor of the arena. Are my attack patterns too predictable? Taking a better look at the surroundings, Alex noticed that whenever he attacked, he would leave imprints of his foot on the ground. The one thing he managed to notice as he looked at the arena was that he had only been attacking from the front. His footprints would only be left whenever he propelled his body forward in a straight line. He had done so to maximize his speed, but he now realized that because of that, his attacks had become predictable. With him just charging from the front, his attack range became much more narrow, making it easier for the opponent to defend against. This was a serious flaw. What if he suddenly switched attack patterns and made them harder to predict? As his thoughts reached that far, gripping onto his spear, Alex once again dashed in my direction. This time, his movements were quite complex. Like a crab, he zigzagged as he steadily charged forward. His movements were not as predictable, as they had no set pattern, a stark contrast to before when he would directly lunge in my direction. It was obvious that he knew that just brute forcing his way through was not going to give him the win. Although I was surprised by his sudden actions, it was all futile on his end. It did not matter if he made it hard for me to predict his movements. I did not need to predict in the first place. Gesturing with my hands, the rings revolving around me moved and surrounded Alex, restricting his movements. Ah fuck. With the rings around him, Alex could only helplessly stop trying to move in a zigzag pattern and charge at me directly. Damn it, fight me already. It is time to release the bait. Noticing Alex becoming increasingly frustrated by my fighting style, I knew it was time to end the match. In one swift and fast movement, jumbling up the rings together, with 2 rings at the bottom and 1 at the top, I formed a triangle. With a movement of my hand, the triangle started rotating in front of me, creating a large defensive shield. However, if one looked closely, although the shield looked huge and impenetrable, there was a small gap in the middle of it, small enough for a human to fit in. That was on purpose. The reason I rotated the ring was not so that it would create a visual image of a pure shield. It was done so that Alex would assume I was covering up the small flaw. Just as I predicted, halting his steps, Alex stared at the large ring before him. Noticing something, his previous grim expression disappeared, and a smirk appeared on his face. Ha, it looks like God has not given up on me. Tensing his calves, Alex propelled his body forward, creating 2 small craters on the ground beneath his feet. The sound of an explosion resounded throughout the arena as Alex disappeared from where he was standing. In an instant, he appeared before the shield. Whilst in the air, stabbing his spear forward, Alex leaned his body forward and smoothly dived into the ring, appearing right before me. Smiling manically, he shouted, "Die." Watching the tip of the spears nearing my face, I grinned. So predictable. Sidestepping, narrowly avoiding the spear as it grazed my shoulder, I briefly made eye contact with Alex. Smiling, coating my fist with mana, I threw an uppercut towards Alex, who was still in the air. Quaya. Although he tried to avoid my fist, in the end, because he was moving too fast, it still connected. As my fist hit his stomach, a large shockwave swept the arena, and Alex's eyes became dyed in white for a split second. Dropping on the ground hard, holding onto his stomach, green liquid escaped from Alex's mouth as he constantly gagged. KHHH. Arriving in front of Alex, stepping on his face, I looked down on him and smirked. Slowly the white glow around me intensified. Soon, my F-ranked pressure enveloped the whole arena, causing Alex, who was on the ground, to open his eyes wide. How you? Smiling at him, I nodded my head. Yeah, I never considered you an opponent to begin with. Stomping onto his face once, Alex passed out on the ground. Phew. Taking a deep breath, I looked towards my surroundings. Silence. Everything around me was silent. Be it the referee, the audience, Martin, or my parents, no one spoke. Only silence prevailed in the arena. Not paying any mind to it, I once again looked down on Alex. I guess you really were right about us being in completely different worlds. Chapter 81. I am not outstanding. If we exclude the fact that I practiced a 5-star manual, nothing about me was outstanding. Not my stats. Not my physique. Not my skills. Compared to Kevin, who had a system aiding him all the times, or the other main characters who had every resource they could ask for, I had nothing. I was not blessed by the plot armor like the protagonists were. Everything I got was through shedding blood, sweat, and tears. I gained everything that I got by either putting my life on the line to get it, or by sacrificing something important. I had to make do with what I had. When facing an opponent like Alex, who had a lot more combat experience than I had, and moreover set a handicap to myself, I had to fight using everything that I had available at my disposal. Thus, I chose to fight a mental battle. Since I knew that despite being weaker than me, Alex had more experience than me, I chose to beat him mentally. Everything started with our first clash. Right when I broke his nose using the scabbard of my sword. That is when the mental beatdown started. By winning the very first clash, I had already started setting the tone of the battle. The confidence he had since the beginning of the fight had now diminished, and what replaced it was both shock and anger. It was always pride. Having read many novels with arrogant young masters, I knew that for prideful individuals like him, just a small loss was enough to influence their actions. And I was right. From that point on, his attacks started becoming more predictable, and his emotions started to influence his decisions. I then proceeded to block his every attack. With every thrust or stab of his spear, one of my rings would continuously block his every attack. The more he attacked, the more he realized he could not do anything. He was helpless. Once again, his confidence took another hit, and self-doubt started to set into his mind. Frustration, annoyance, rage, impatience. As those emotions started to set into his mind, with every minute the fight continued, he became sloppier. His weak mentality led to his loss. The opening I created with my rings could have easily been spotted if he had thought about it carefully. With him being someone who had fought many battles before, he should have easily spotted it. However, because of how unstable his mental state was, he ignored that scenario and went for the win. He fell for such an obvious trap, and I capitalized on it. Staring at Alex, who was on the ground passed out, beneath my feet, a strange feeling surged from within me. So this is how it feels to win, huh? I was not outstanding. I did not need to be outstanding. I did not need the plot armor to constantly follow me. I did not need to take all the cheat items for myself. All I needed to do was polish what I had and make do with it. The crowd erupted in massive, boisterous cheers that engulfed the entire arena. Phew. Taking a deep breath, I basked in the moment. I do not dislike this feeling. Entering the stage, the host looked at Alex, who was passed out on the floor for a couple of seconds before looking at the crowd and announcing, "And the winner of the duel is Ren Dover." Once again, cheers resounded across the stadium as everyone started chanting my name. Ren, Ren, Ren. Under the barrage of cheers, I looked in the distance and saw my parents cheering with the crowd. Even my father, who was usually stoic, was cheering alongside everyone. Despite all odds, after having fought for 5 minutes and 46 seconds, Ren Dover managed to defeat Alex Cloudburn, a renowned B-ranked prospect brought by our very own Vice Guildmaster. As the cameras pointed towards the stands and Martin's face was shown on the big screens of the arena, everyone saw Martin expressionlessly staring at the arena. No one knew his thoughts. He looked completely indifferent to everything, almost as if what had happened had nothing to do with him. Pointing the cameras back to me, the host continued. Using some unknown technique, Ren created an impenetrable defense that created massive headaches for his opponent Alex. And through. As the host continued speaking and replayed highlights of the match on the big screens, I left the arena and headed back towards the changing room. Just as I set foot outside of the arena, my mother appeared on the pathway to the changing room. Ren, running in my direction, my mother lunged in my direction and hugged me tightly. Because she was running so fast, the moment she hugged me, it felt as if all the air had been knocked out of me, and I took 2 steps back. "Oka, are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" Releasing me from her hug, my mother patted my body all over to check for any injuries. To be honest, her hug hurt more than whatever Alex did throughout the whole fight. "I am fine." Bitterly smiling, I flexed my arms and reassured her I was fine. "That is good." Sighing in relief, my mother looked at me curiously before asking, "Ren, when did you get so strong?" Listening to her question, my mouth twitched. I could not just tell her that this world was based on a novel I created, and that I took advantage of my knowledge as the author to take a couple of cheat items. Fortunately, I had already come up with a good excuse beforehand. "Mom, did you forget what kind of place I attend?" Frowning, my mother fell into deep thought. "I know that the Lock is the best academy in the human domain, but you suddenly went from G rank to F rank in less than 3 months. That is not something that can be achieved in such little time." What she said makes sense. It usually took people half to a whole year to increase a rank. Me suddenly jumping a rank in as little as 3 months seems unnatural. Where is Nola? In the end, I could only pretend to be ignorant about her question and shift the topic towards a different topic. "She is with your father in the stands." Noticing the fact that I was avoiding the question, my mother played along with it, to which I was grateful. Maybe one day, I will come clean and explain to her about what I went through to get as strong as I was now. But it still was not the time yet, especially with everything that was going on with the guild. I would not want them to start worrying. Maybe one day. Ashton City, Northern District, 5 p.m. Inside of a luxurious room, 2 individuals sat facing each other. Sitting on one of the sofas, Martin with his head held down, recounted the events of today. And that is what happened. After he finished speaking, Martin shut up. He did not dare utter another word. This was not out of choice. It was out of the innate fear he had towards the man that was sitting before him. "So Alex failed, ha?" Lightly smiling, an old man with light gray hair and light gray goatee tapped on the armrest of his chair. Tap, tap, tap. With every tap of his fingers, Martin felt as if his heart was beating along with it. Cold sweat appeared on his back. Knowing who the man before him was, he would not be surprised if he was suddenly discarded and left for dead somewhere in Ashton City. "No, I have already come this far. I cannot fail here." Clenching his teeth, Martin lowered his head and tried to apologize. However, before he could do that, glancing in Martin's direction, the old man's deep voice echoed across the room. "Don't worry, I am not mad. It was something that even I did not expect." Sighing in relief, Martin raised his head and tried to thank the old man. "Thank you, Koyu." Spurt. However, as soon as Martin raised his head, a dagger pierced him in the right eye. Screaming in agony, Martin covered his eye with his hand as blood dripped on the ground. "Kyua. Shut up." Glaring in Martin's direction, an enormous pressure bore down on him, causing him to shut up immediately. "I have already forgiven you. If you continue screaming, it will not just end at one eye." Wiping his hand with a white handkerchief, the old man spoke, to which Martin nodded his head in understanding. "Thank you for your generosity." Satisfied, the old man sat back on his chair. "So, you are saying that the name of the kid who beat Alex was Ren?" Hurriedly nodding his head, Martin answered. "Yes. Ren Dover, Ren Dover." Repeating the name of the kid who beat Alex a couple of times, the old man thought for a while before turning his attention towards a middle-aged man standing at the entrance of the room. Tim, call Matthew here." "As you wish, master." Politely nodding his head, the middle-aged man named Tim quietly left the room. Knock, knock. Soon after, moments after Tim disappeared, someone knocked on the door. "Father, did you call me?" Slightly opening the door, a youth wearing a grayish-black suit entered the room. He appeared to be in his late teens or so. His face was handsome with a pair of unusually bright eyes that seemed to be able to see through one's heart. The first impression that this youth gave was that he was a refined individual, with a bright head on his shoulders. If this youth held a book in his hand, he would likely appear no different from a scholar. Staring at the youth before him with keen interest, A hint of pride appeared in the old man's voice as he asked, "Yes, do you by chance know a kid around your age called Ren Dover?" Taken aback by the question, the youth looked at the old man in confusion. Ren Dover. Yes, that is his name. Smiling widely, Matthew nodded. But of course, we were best friends in middle school. Chapter 82. It was the day after the battle between me and Alex had taken place. I was currently in my father's office. Sitting on a large gray sofa, I took a look around the room. On the opposite side of me, my father was working at a large rosewood desk, busy compiling a stack of paperwork. His pen drifted in swift and fluent movements across the papers on his desk. He looked incredibly efficient. Staring at my father's desk, I could see a group of papers, a stack of waiter pads, a portable laptop, and multiple monitors neatly standing on top of the large surface. On the floor below the desk, a PC tower hummed quietly. On small occasions, a blue light would twinkle on top of the tower, signaling that its power was on. On the wall to the right, Post-it notes appeared on top of a wooden board with several labels and photos marked on it. Although the office was not the most organized, the number of papers on his desk showed how much work my father was investing every day to keep the guild afloat. Ren. My father spoke, disrupting the silence. Yes. Putting the pen in his hand down, my father's obsidian eyes stared at me. What do you think of our guild? Be honest. Taken aback for a second, I leaned back on the sofa. What did I think of the guild? Honestly, it was bad. From what I had seen yesterday and today, the guild was not united. It was split into different factions, and there was an evident power struggle. I did not even know how they managed to keep what was happening within the guild a secret from outsiders. I would bet bronze or silver graded guilds would love to capitalize on this piece of news. I mean, why wouldn't they? Although Galzacus was failing, if the guilds were looking to expand, absorbing Galzacus was the most optimal thing to do. Especially since right now, Galzacus was only a guild in name. It was merely an empty title. It was like a shop that sold nothing. The only reason why it was still standing today was because of my parents' efforts. But that was not going to last long, as even they would crumble under all of that work. As my thoughts reached this point, I could not help but be reminded of the fact that my parents were still working on a Sunday. Not once did they rest. If things continued to proceed like this, I would not give the guild a year before it would be forced to dissolve. Hesitating for a bit, I looked at my father's earnest expression and shared my thoughts. If I had to be honest, terrible. The guild members, instead of being united, are clearly split into factions and, as I recounted my honest thoughts, Ronald nodded his head and sighed. Judging from the way you are speaking, I can already guess you have already figured out how things are going within the guild. Glancing at the piles of paper below him, a trace of sadness appeared in my father's eyes as he murmured, sadly, the guild is in a state of heavy decline. Stacking the papers on his desk neatly and leaning back on his chair, my father looked towards the ceiling. My plan was to one day let you be the guild master of this guild. I wanted to pass this guild on to you so that in the future you would carry it to greater success, but it seems like it was all my wishful thinking. Glancing towards the drawer of his desk, my father took out a silver key from his pocket and inserted it into the lock. Clank. Unlocking the drawer, my father slid it open. Taking out a thick green book, my father glanced at it for a second, and a hint of nostalgia appeared in his eyes. When I saw you fight yesterday, I observed that despite having a great defense, you lacked something important. At first, I thought it was an attacking art, but after I put more thought into it, I figured that this book would be more beneficial to you. Taking one last glance at the book, my father handed it to me. Here. Shocked, I looked at my father. Though he looked stoic and indifferent, his eyes carried warmth within them. Whatever he was giving me, it was definitely precious to him, and now he was giving it to me. Thank you. Nodding solemnly, I took the green book. I will never forget his favor. The book was titled Drifting Steps, a 3-star movement art that progressed with each step. With every step taken, user speed will increase. Unless the user stops, speed will continuously increase until the user either runs out of mana or sustains an injury. TSSSS. This was precisely what I needed. A movement art. Was this a coincidence? Glancing at my father, he had an all-knowing look, as though he knew from the very beginning that I needed this. I guess he was not a guild master for nothing. After having only watched me fight once, he could already detect what I was missing. With this movement art, my strength would see another boost. Especially since I was already near breaking through to F+ rank, I could feel that I was only a few days away. As I was busy admiring the book, pointing at it, my father said, "That movement art is one of the guild's top arts, and I am technically not supposed to be giving it to you. The reason is that it is against the rules, as I would normally need to acquire the permission of the board before being allowed to even show you this." But, pausing and turning around, my father looked out the window of the office towards the busy streets of Ashton City. In a firm voice he said, "But looking at the state of the guild, I do not see the need for me to be reserved." With his back still facing me, my father, Ronald Dover, resolutely looked at the people coming in and out of the building. After a short pause, he turned around and in a solemn voice said, "I want to set up a different branch for our guild." A branch? Taken aback, I tilted my head in confusion. If the guild was failing, why set up a branch? That just did not make sense. Yes, and you are going to lead it. What? Shocked, I looked at my father with wide eyes. What kind of joke was this? I was still in my first year in the lock, so how could I possibly have enough time to run a branch? Asking me to operate a branch would mean that I would not even have time to attend my lectures, let alone classes. Watching the streets below him, Ronald Dover smiled. Ren, in this world, you are either a pawn or a king. You can either be someone who continuously follows others' will or be someone who dictates their own will. Although setting up a branch of a failing guild seems like a stupid idea, in reality, my goal is not actually to set up a branch. Noticing a subtle hint within his words, a sudden thought occurred to me as I looked at my father in shock. You do not mean? Yes. I want you to set up a mercenary group. A mercenary group. A group composed of talented unaffiliated individuals who do tasks for money, be it killing certain monsters, villains, or corrupt individuals. They were the ones you would call. Mercenary groups were just as popular as guilds, with some being just as influential as some of the top guilds in the human domain. And my father was asking me to set up a mercenary corp. Placing my hand on my chin, I thought about it. If it was a mercenary group, it was possible. Although hard, it was possible. There were 2 requirements to set up a mercenary corp. One was to have at least one individual with a hero certification, or to get a recommendation from a graded guild. Though I could not get a hero certification, as I had not yet graduated from the academy, with the recommendation of my father, setting up a mercenary corp was not a pipe dream. Creating my own organization, the idea did sound tempting. Creating an organization filled with people that I could control. The more I thought about it, the more I started realizing that this was what I actually needed. After realizing that things did not always go according to plan, rather than remaining passive, why not set up my own organization? An organization that operated in the shadows as my henchmen. If Kevin and the rest were the light, why not be the shadow? Licking my dry lips, I crossed my legs and thought, if I was going to do it, I may as well go big. With my knowledge of the future, I knew certain people who did not have much time in the novel, but were in fact extremely talented in their own right. With my very own organization backing me, I would not need to worry about problems that kept haunting me since the very first day I reincarnated. Yes, why did I not think about this before? Firming my mind and looking at my father, I said, all right, I will do it. Nodding his head and seeing my resolute eyes, a smile appeared on Ronald Dover's face. Good choice. Leaving my father's office, I already started thinking of all the talented people whom I could poach into joining the future mercenary corp. I already had a couple of people in mind. Just as I was about to make a list of the people I wanted to join my mercenary group, at that moment, my phone vibrated. Turning on the phone, I checked who was calling me. Soon a smile appeared on my lips. Just the person I was looking for, as Small Snake appeared on the caller ID. Hello? As soon as I picked up the phone, Small Snake's face popped up on a hologram screen. Yo, it's been a while. What's up? Where are you? I can hear a lot of people around you. Me? I'm at my parents' guild. I raised my phone and showed him the nearby scenery. Been sorting out the family stuff at the guild. Really? Yep, anyways, I need to talk to you about something. Go ahead. Not on the phone. Meet me near my guild in the northern district. That's kind of far. Trust me, you won't regret what I am going to say to you. Seeing me smile mysteriously, Small Snake's expression turned skeptical. In the end, he nodded. All right. Perfect. All right, see you in a bit. Smiling triumphantly, I hung up the phone. This better be worth it. Turning off the phone, a trace of a smile appeared on my face. Putting on my coat, I went towards a nearby cafe and sent Small Snake my location. I wonder how big my organization will become. Chapter 83. Thank you for coming. Taking a sip of my latte, I glanced towards Small Snake who was sitting on the opposite seat to mine. With his arms and legs crossed, Small Snake looked at me in annoyance. This better be worth it. It took me 30 minutes to get here. I am a busy man. I covered my mouth and almost laughed out loud. Stop deluding yourself. Apart from me, there is no one else you currently manage. He was speechless, and his demeanor crumbled as he could not find any words to use to refute what I said. It was true. In the latter half of the novel, when Small Snake met Kevin, he was still unemployed. This meant that apart from me, there was no one else he managed. Although he was not lying about taking 30 minutes to arrive here, he was not busy at all. He was merely pretending to look busy. With a vein popping from his forehead, Small Snake extended his hand in my direction. Get to the point. Nodding my head, I suddenly turned serious. Locking my fingers together, I rested my chin on them. Staring right into Small Snake's green eyes, I solemnly said, I want to create a mercenary group. Congrats. Thanks, and you are going to be in it. Nodding his head repeatedly, a smile appeared on Small Snake's face. It was the smile of someone that had transcended humanity. So let me get this straight. You made me come all the way here to join your mercenary group that still has not been founded nor has any members? Yeah. As expected of someone as smart as Small Snake, he instantly understood what I said. Who said I am the only member? There are others? No, not yet. Small Snake stared at me with a dumbstruck expression. I scratched the back of my head, took a sip of my latte, and murmured, they will eventually join. He let out a long, breathless sigh. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. It was always like this with me. I always made proposals that did not make sense, yet I still looked so confident. I was almost certain that whatever I was planning was going to succeed. Small Snake just did not understand. Where did that confidence come from? Sigh, I am sorry, but I will have to refuse. In the end, even though he was slightly tempted, Small Snake refused. More than him not wanting to join, it was more like he could not join. In the first place, if it was not for his current situation, he would have never worked in the black market. I mean, why would someone as talented as him work as a low-leveled broker in the black market? It just did not add up. Do you have anything else to say? Not bothered by Small Snake's refusal, I exaggeratedly sighed and murmured in a tone that Small Snake could hear. Sigh, and here I was doing this for your own good. Shaking his head and finishing his drink, Small Snake prepared to leave. I guess you really just called me to waste time. Leaning on my seat and staring at Small Snake as he prepared to leave, I said in a voice that only he could hear, I know you are being hunted by the monolith. What? The chair behind Small Snake fell as he stood up abruptly, pointing at me, his voice shook. How did you know? SHHH. Putting my finger on my mouth, I motioned for Small Snake to calm down and sit. First, calm down. Look around you, everyone is looking. Glancing towards his surroundings, Small Snake noticed everyone staring at him. Sorry. Apologizing, Small Snake took a deep breath to calm his mind. He then proceeded to rub his forehead. All right, I am better. After a short pause, whilst still standing, a small frown emerged on his brows. Looking at me, he said, how did you know? Taking a look at the half-filled latte in my hand, I twirled the cup. How did I know? Well, let's just say that you are not the only person that can dig into someone else's past. Well, more or less. As long as I wrote about them, I knew their backstory. Anyhow, if you join me, I can help you with regards to the monolith situation. Frowning, after a short pause, Small Snake could not help but once again ask for confirmation. When you mentioned the monolith, you mean the same monolith I am thinking about? Smiling mysteriously, I nodded. Yep, that monolith. The same monolith that you are thinking of, and the Union equivalent for villains. He hissed, TSSSSS. Sitting back down, Small Snake's face became grim. His reaction was understandable. The reason why Small Snake was working in the black market was precisely because of the monolith. It was a hidden organization that housed the strongest and most powerful villains in the human domain. They were also known as the Anti-Union. After having been caught trying to infiltrate the ranks of the monolith, a massive manhunt for Small Snake's head began. Because of how powerful the monolith was, Small Snake could only helplessly lay low inside the black market. It was the only organization that could barely protect him. If it were not for the fact that Small Snake had connections with some of the higher-ups of the black market, he would have long been caught by the monolith. With their aid, he managed to secure himself a job at a brokerage firm where he could lay low. If you choose to trust me like before, I promise you will not regret it. Hesitating for a bit, Small Snake looked at me before saying, how did you find out about my circumstances and the monolith? Leaning back on my chair, I smiled. Oh, trust me. There is no one that knows more about the monolith than I do. Well, I was the author of this world after all. Because of how important they became in the second volume of the novel, I had an in-depth understanding of the monolith. I knew who their members comprised of, where their secret hideout was located, and what plans they were brewing. I knew everything. And of course, I also knew about Small Snake's circumstances. He was after all an important character that appeared in the latter half of the novel. Staying silent for a couple of seconds, Small Snake looked at me deeply. Though I could not read his thoughts, I knew that he was currently calculating his options. He could either trust me or carry on with whatever he was doing in the black market. In the end, his decision came down to how much he trusted me. After a couple of more seconds, and taking a long and exhausted sigh, Small Snake extended his hand in my direction. I do not even know why I am doing this, but alright, if you keep good on your promise I will join you. Haha, I knew you would make the right choice. Extending my hand forward, we both shook hands. The first member of my mercenary group had officially joined. After we shook hands, Small Snake's mood brightened up a bit. Thinking for a bit, he looked at me and asked, what will the name of the group be? Without hesitation I responded, Kesa. Kesa. Yeah, named after the goddess of chess. Frowning, Small Snake placed his hand under his chin, confused. The goddess of chess? Why chess? Smiling, I turned on the holographic function of my phone. Soon, a chessboard was projected before us. Pointing towards the chessboard, I said, the mercenary group will consist of 8 main seats. Each will correspond to the main chess pieces on this board. Pausing to make sure Small Snake was following, I continued. There will be 1 king, 1 queen, 2 rooks, 2 bishops, and 2 knights. Any other member will be a pawn. Depending on ability, I will assign them a seat accordingly. Nodding his head, Small Snake cut me in the middle of my sentence. Let me guess, you are the king, right? If so, who are the other members you are thinking of recruiting, and who is going to be the queen? Glancing at Small Snake for a brief moment, I seriously nodded my head. I understand. If you are that adamant about becoming the queen, I do not mind. Nodding his head, Small Snake kept his cool. Sarcasm and teasing barely bothered him now, probably because he suffered way too much shame and humiliation. Letting go of his pride was hard at first, but after realizing that there was no way for him to retaliate, he could only ignore it. Especially since he was now his boss. No, I am good. Tisk, how boring. Clicking my tongue, I continued, you are my first member, and after a bit of thinking, I decided that you will be a bishop. Frowning slightly, he could not help but ask, why a bishop? Smiling, I did not elaborate. I did not want him to realize what his role was going to be before it was too late. Because I said so. It was not really related to chess, but typically bishops were people who were generally entrusted with a position of authority and oversight. This was precisely the role that Small Snake would play in our group. Though he was not strong, he had connections and a bright head on his shoulders. With his talents, the mercenary group would be able to expand accordingly, without any issues regarding finding the right connections for supplies, potions, and other things that generally gave headaches to guilds and other mercenary groups. If I had to put this bluntly, he was the group babysitter. After explaining a few more things to Small Snake, I glanced at my watch and checked the time. Finishing my drink, I stood up. All right, I guess that is that for now. I had a lot to do. Setting up a mercenary group was not easy. There were a lot of things I had to get done by the end of the day. I needed to come up with a list of people who I wanted to recruit to my group. I also needed to find an appropriate location for the group and register the group name. Only after I completed all of those tasks would I finally be able to actually start recruiting members. Fortunately, I already had an idea of who to recruit, meaning that right now the main priority was finding an appropriate location and officially registering the name of the group so that we could finally be considered a proper mercenary group. Standing up, I bid farewell to Small Snake and headed towards the exit of the cafe. Just right before I separated from Small Snake, I said, "Meet me tomorrow, and I will give you a list of people I want to recruit." Okay. Nodding his head, Small Snake watched my figure leave the cafe. As he did, he could not help but think, hopefully, I made the right decision. Chapter 84. The Mercenary Corp was named Kesa. It held a grade of I, with one member, and Ren Dover as the founder. I stood under the blazing sun and the blue sky, enjoying the clear and warm Ashton City weather. Exiting an enormous building, I glanced at an azure-colored card in my hand. The card was made out of metal, and on its back was a large Roman I engraved on it. This signified the rank of the mercenary group. Since this world likes to rank everything, Mercenary Corps 2 were ranked. They went from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. Anyhow, ranks aside, because Small Snake had still not officially joined the guild yet, the member count on the card was 1. Me. When he joins, the card will change accordingly. One of the things that I was a bit hesitant about when creating the corp was whether I should use an alias or my name for the founder section of the card. Ideally, my goal was to make this one of the strongest mercenary groups in the human domain. I wasn't sure if making my name known would be ideal or not, but, in the end, I decided to use my name. There was no reason for me to hide my identity. After all, I did create this as an affiliate with Galsicus. Even if I tried to hide it, people would easily be able to deduce who I was. Alright, now that I successfully established the Mercenary Corp, it is time for the next task. Putting the card back into my pocket, I checked my watch. It was 6:45 p.m. Seeing the time, I moved towards my next location. I had made an appointment to meet with someone for a possible place that I could use for the headquarters for Kesa. I had checked many places through my phone, but I thought that the one I was currently heading to fit my ideal for the headquarters the best. Welcome. Arriving inside of a large warehouse, a fat middle-aged man wearing a wrinkled black suit came to greet me. Taking out a white handkerchief from his pocket, he wiped the sweat that had accumulated on his forehead. So, staring at me with anticipation, the fat middle-aged man fiddled with his hands. It was evident from his demeanor that he wanted to get rid of the place at all cost. Glancing at the space, I nodded. The warehouse, although empty, was extremely large. It was located quite a distance away from the main city, and apart from a couple of roads and greenery, there really wasn't anything around it. This was precisely why I liked it. It was plain and boring. It was the perfect place to hide the location of the headquarters. Alright, I'll buy it. Checking my account balance and confirming that I had just about 6 million U in my bank, I decided to directly buy the warehouse with most of the money I had. In total, the warehouse cost me 4,200,000 U. Though expensive, I didn't mind it. That's how much I liked the place. I could have rented a different place, but after a bit of thinking, I opted to buy my own space so that I could do the appropriate modifications. Money wasn't necessarily a problem for me. I could easily make what I lost back with stocks again. With Small Snake helping me, the repercussion of my actions wouldn't come back and bite me, as no one would be able to trace me. In fact, with my knowledge, I could easily make enough money to pay back my parents' guild debt. However, their debt was probably the least of their worries. With the internal strife going on inside of the guild, paying off the debt would do nothing. Moreover, I also wanted to shroud my organization with a veil of mystery. With this place being hidden, it added an element of mystery to those that want to find out more about our organization. I didn't want to create an organization that had a lot of members. I wanted to keep to a maximum of 20 elite members. These would be members that stood out from the rest. Quality over quantity. I wanted to reach a point in the future that whenever one of our members moved, organizations would tremble. So, how do you like the place? Glancing at Small Snake beside me, I asked for his opinion as I showed him the warehouse I bought. Well, why? Trying to find words to say, Small Snake was speechless. The location of the warehouse was in the middle of nowhere, and the place was empty. It was sad, very sad. Compared to every other organization Small Snake had been to, even the worst one wasn't as bad as this. Glancing at his employer beside him, Small Snake really couldn't understand what was in his mind. Once again, he couldn't help but start doubting his decision to join him. You don't really need to answer. Was just asking out of politeness. Already bought the place after all. Looking at his reaction and shrugging my shoulders, I took a pile of papers from a folder I had on me and gave them to Small Snake. Here, what's this? Taking the papers, Small Snake frowned. After flipping through them, he couldn't help but tilt his head in confusion. Why them? Don't ask questions. Find information about them and send them to me. You won't understand unless you see them in action. Okay. Nodding his head, Small Snake sighed before taking a better look at the lists before him. What I just handed Small Snake was a brief description of a few individuals I wanted him to find information on. The list I had given him contained a lot of names, but I needed to narrow it down. I needed to take their characters into consideration, as well as the likelihood of being able to entice them to join Casa. Arrogant or not arrogant, brave or not brave, money-driven or not. Everyone was different, and that's why I needed information. Because they were, after all, extras. Although I wrote about them, I didn't know too much about their backstory. If I wanted to recruit them, I needed to be able to familiarize myself with them better so that I could entice them more convincingly. Ah, by the way, Small Snake. Remembering something, glancing towards Small Snake, I said. I highlighted 3 names in red. Those are the top priority. Make sure you give me details about them, from their past and current situation. I want them all. All right, let me see. Flipping through the page, Small Snake's eyes paused on the names of the 3 individuals I had highlighted. His previous frown deepened. Just what? Though his reaction was understandable, there was a reason why I prioritized them. It wasn't because they were the best, no. It was because they were the easiest to recruit considering what kind of circumstances I was in. Especially since recruiting people into a newly established guild was extremely hard. Don't get me wrong though, just because they were easier to recruit wasn't the only reason I highlighted their names. They were all extremely talented individuals that would no doubt add value to the members of the guild. Hiu. Opening a copy of the files, I looked at the first highlighted profile. Ava Leafs was 16 years old, a student at Lock 976, and possessed an unranked potential. Ava in the novel was a monster tamer. She does make a few appearances in the novel, but in the end, her roles always tended to be small. She'd just appear on one chapter, and then just disappear for 20 more to once again appear for one chapter and disappear for another 20. A true extra. I remember that in the last volume of the novel, during the 3rd cataclysm, she was supposed to make another appearance. I had planned for her to appear when the alliance between the 4 races was about to suffer major losses. She with an army of beasts would join the alliance and give them some breathing space and increase their momentum in the fight against demons. She was finally going to show the world how strong her profession was. With an army of beasts, she would decimate and destroy multiple demons at once. Unfortunately, that never happened. Just when I was about to get to that part, I died. One good thing about her was that because she wasn't heavily involved with the plotline, my interfering with her wouldn't cause any trouble to anyone. Plus, with my knowledge as the author, I actually knew about the location of an item she was supposed to get at the end of the novel. It was sort of a cheat item. It essentially allowed for her to control multiple beasts at a time. Since it was meant to be hers, me getting it and giving it to her wouldn't affect the future events of the story. She'll just be stronger faster than originally meant. Which was ideal. Thinking thus far, I glanced at the next person on the list. Leopold Ray was 32 years old, a mercenary at the Moonlight Corps, with a potential and a current rank of D. An experienced mercenary, who appears in the 3rd volume of the book. Although he wasn't necessarily outstanding in combat, he was a very competent leader and commander. The reason why I chose him was because we needed someone with experience to help us. Being new, I knew nothing about how to run a mercenary corps. With him aiding me, developing this organization wasn't a problem. But that wasn't the only reason why I chose him. He had another talent. He was an extremely strong commander. During one of the arcs of the novel, Leopold would take charge of a few troops to fight against villains, and thanks to his heroic deeds he was able to survive and complete the mission flawlessly. He meets Kevin on multiple occasions in the novel, and although Kevin had a good impression of him, he never managed to really enter Kevin's party, which in all honesty would have benefited a lot if they had someone as experienced as him helping them. Sighing, I looked at the last name on the list. Ryan Palive was 12 years old, currently unemployed, with an S potential, and an unranked current standing. A child prodigy. A child born with a supercomputer of a brain. He could calculate the probability of different factors in a matter of seconds. Whatever scenario was presented before him, he would be able to calculate everything in a matter of seconds, detailing the best route and action to take. He appeared in the 4th volume of the novel, and by the time Kevin found him, he was already dead. He was part of a medium-sized guild that exploited his abilities. They would continuously make him stay at night and work him to the bone. A 12-year-old child. Sadly, he was later killed by his own guild master due to Kevin foiling the plans he had come up with on multiple occasions. In the end, Kevin caught the guild master and killed him on the spot. Must have them. Those were the 3 main people I had set my mind on recruiting. Glancing at Small Snake, who was busy looking at the files I gave him, I smiled. Though he may be doubting me now, as soon as he sees them, he will realize their true potential. I was sure. Chapter 85. 7 a.m. Staring at the clock stuck on the wall of my house, I headed to the kitchen and made myself some coffee. The lights of the villa were shut, and I was the only person in the house. My parents already went to the guild, and Nola was at daycare, so I had the whole place to myself. Sliding the door that led to the garden, I felt the morning breeze cool down my body instantly. For the past few days, I had been fairly busy. After spending a lot of time remodeling the warehouse as well as studying for my exams, I barely had any time to focus on my training. The only time I had available was usually early in the morning. Taking a deep breath, I sat cross-legged in the garden. It was about time I broke through my rank. Taking out multiple potions from my dimensional space, I opened the thumb-sized bottle cap and gulped one of the potions down. Gulp. At first, the potion was tasteless, but soon after, a bitter aftertaste invaded the tonsils of my tongue. The aftertaste was similar to that of a shot of espresso, very bitter. Exhaling and taking a long deep breath, I focused my mind on spreading the effects of the potion throughout my body. Instantly, the cells within my body jumped in excitement. Streams of energy circulated around my body, as white steam slowly escaped from my body, creating a white mist around me. Gulp. Without skipping a beat, after I felt the effects of the first potion wearing out, I instantly downed another one. Like that, I repeated the process 3 more times until I suddenly felt my body bloat, and the muscles of my body twitch. Panting heavily, I cleared my mind. Soon after, the twitching stopped and a wave of energy washed over my body, revitalizing all of my muscles. My head became lucid, as well as my senses. Suddenly, everything around me became clearer. The water droplet dripping from the blade of grass in the distance became more perceptible. The sound of the birds chirping became more apparent, and the smells around me intensified. It felt as if everything around me was within my grasp. Exhaling and adjusting myself to the changes around me, I looked at my status window. The name was Ren Dover, and the rank was F+. My strength was F+, agility was F+, stamina was F, intelligence was F, mana capacity was F+, luck was E, and charm was G. My profession was swordsmanship level 2. The degree of understanding of the sword has evolved to the next level. The user will find it easier to understand concepts that were previously harder to understand. Regarding my martial manual, the Keiki style was at the minor realm of mastery. It is a sword art created by Grandmaster Tashimato Keiki, a 5-star module that focused primarily on reaching the apex of swordsmanship and speed. Upon mastery, the sword art becomes so fast that before an opponent could even think about their next move, their heads would already be rolling on the ground. The Ring of Vindication was also at a minor realm of mastery. This is a highly advanced sword art that creates a perfect ring of defense around the user. Upon mastery, the ring can create a 3-dimensional sphere that protects the user from all sides. Because of the lack of offensive capabilities, the manual was graded 3 stars. I also possessed the drifting steps, a movement art that progresses with each step. With every step taken, user speed will increase. Unless the user stops, speed will continuously increase until the user either runs out of mana or due to injury. My skill, Monarch's Indifference, was G rank. This is a skill that enables users to erase all emotions and act as a supreme monarch that only calculates the best option regardless of circumstance. I did it. I broke through to the next rank. I was now a small rank away from reaching E rank. Judging from the way I was progressing, if nothing strange happened, in either a month or 2 I could finally break through again. I had consumed the seed of limit, so my training speed was even faster than the likes of Kevin. Still, he had a system, so it is not like it really made a difference for him. Standing up, I stretched my body. I could instantly feel the fibers of my muscles being more durable and flexible, almost as if the power within them had doubled. Kaka. Punching the air, a small shockwave swept the garden. The grass around the area I punched split apart, and a gush of air swept the surroundings. Not bad. Nodding in satisfaction, and staring at my fist for a few seconds, I decided to head back into the house. It was about time I practiced the new movement art my dad gave me. The garden was too small for me, therefore, I decided to go to the park. Putting on my shoes, I quickly left the house. Clank, swoosh. Like a lightning bolt, my figure sped around the park at incredible speeds. Like a shadow, my silhouette ran around the park. As I ran, the world around me became slower and slower, almost as if time had slowed down. However, that did not last long as I soon ran out of mana. Huff, huff, huff. Stopping and resting my hands on my knees, I felt the morning air rush past me. I was tired. With every step I took, my speed increased. It was almost like I was endlessly accelerating. Drifting steps. That was the name of the movement art I was practicing. With each step I took, my speed increased. At first, I was running at a regular pace, but as time passed, and the longer I ran, the faster I became. It got to the point where I was running so fast that I almost crashed against a couple of trees along the way. This was mainly due to the fact that I could not control my body properly as I ran, thus exposing me to danger. Had this not been an open space, I would have definitely gotten injured. Gulp. Downing a stamina recovery potion followed by a mana recovery potion, I prepared to once again do a lap of the park. However, just as I was about to continue practicing, a warm pleasant voice called out for me. Ren, it has been such a long time. Frowning, I looked towards where the voice came from. With his arms crossed and leaning against a tree, a youth wearing a grayish-black suit entered my sight. He appeared to be in his late teens or so. His face was fairly handsome and outstanding. The black suit, which was devoid of any wrinkles coupled with his demeanor, gave off a somewhat dashing aura. His voice was warm, and the way he smiled caused the people around him to have a good feeling. Who was he? I do not remember ever knowing this person. Was he another one of the old Ren's acquaintances? Just as I was about to ask him who he was, my mouth abruptly opened. Hello, Matthew. Ha. Lightly smiling, the youth moved away from the tree and headed in my direction. Laughing, he said, ha ha ha. You have not changed since I last saw you, shy as always. B.A. thump, B.A. thump, B.A. thump. My heart suddenly sped. Cold sweat appeared on my back, and my body trembled. What was this feeling? Was this fear? Why was I experiencing fear over someone I never met before? What is wrong? The closer he got, the more these feelings intensified. Lowering my head, my mouth once again opened, and in a trembling voice I said, haha, it is nothing, Matthew. What is going on? Who is Matthew? And why could I not speak? Millions of questions emerged in my mind as I tried my best to take control of my body. However, it was to no avail. Like a spectator, I could only watch everything unfold before my eyes. I felt powerless, like a bird trapped inside of a cage with no gap to escape. What is happening to me? Halt. Stopping right in front of Ren, Matthew took a good look at him. Noticing his shoulders trembling, the smile on Matthew's face deepened. I see, I am glad to see you again, Ren. Me too. In a light tone, almost as if he was addressing something insignificant, Matthew spoke. I have heard you defeated Alex. Congrats. I did not know you had that in you, my friend. You know, when I heard of the news of you defeating Alex, I was quite surprised. I mean, back in middle school no one would have expected for you to even go beyond G rank, let alone reach F rank. You would not believe how surprised I was when I was told you had reached the F rank, mind blown. As Ren listened to Matthew speaking, his body would shake from time to time. Though he tried to not show any emotions on his face, on rare occasions his face would crumble as emotions such as sadness, rage, helplessness, and despair would appear on it. I am so glad you reached this far after having not seen each other for months. As Matthew finished speaking, scratching his head, Ren meekly said, haha, I just got lucky. Lucky, ha, I guess so. Nodding his head a couple of times, Matthew paused. Staring straight into Ren's eyes, his demeanor completely changed. If before he was like a friendly elder brother, right now he looked like a vicious predator looking at his prey. Ren, as your best friend, I came to give you a piece of advice. Do not do anything unnecessary. Patting him on the shoulder, leaning towards his ear, Matthew whispered, we would not want a similar incident to last time happening now, would we? Nodding his head, Ren's voice shook as he answered, yes. Hearing Ren's confirmation, Matthew laughed out loud. Ah ha ha, that is great, that is great. I am glad that we are on the same page. I was worried that you might do something, Stu. Ring, ring. Stopping mid-sentence, the loud ringing coming from his pocket echoed across the surroundings. Frowning, taking out his phone from his pocket, and looking at the caller ID, Matthew answered it. Hello, all right, I understand, I will be there soon. Tack. After a short call, hanging up the phone, sighing, Matthew once again looked at Ren. Fixing his collar, he waved at him, and turned around. Seems like I need to go. I guess that is it for our little reunion. Though short, I was extremely happy to have caught up with you. I will see you next time. Waving towards Matthew, Ren smiled back. Yes, see you soon. Waving his hand till Matthew disappeared, Ren's face soon became indifferent. Arriving at a nearby bench, he sat down. Phew. Taking a deep breath, his vision turned dark and he passed out. Thud. Chapter 86. Abruptly opening my eyes, I sat up straight. I can control my body again. Touching my face and body, I could not help but be elated. I could now feel my hands, face, and every other part of my body. The senses that I had previously lost had returned to me. I no longer felt like a trapped beast. I could finally move. Ha! Just as I was rejoicing at the fact that I could now control my body, I suddenly noticed my surroundings. What is going on? Was I not at the park moments before? Looking around me, I found myself outside of what seemed to be a kindergarten. Scanning around, I could see children playing tag in the playground of the kindergarten, followed by their parents coming in and out of the premises to pick them up. Confused, I stood up. I tried to walk around, but 3 steps in, an invisible wall stopped me from moving any further. What? Taken aback by the invisible wall, I frowned. Placing my hand on the invisible wall, I exerted a little bit of strength, but it was to no avail as it did not budge. Frowning even harder, I placed both hands on the wall and pushed as hard as I could. Still, in the end, no matter how much strength I put in, the wall did not budge. Turning around, realizing that I could not move the wall, I tried to go in the opposite direction, but it was also to no avail as 3 steps in, another wall blocked me. Taken aback, I tried to move in all directions, but it was futile. Every 3 steps I took, an invisible wall would stop me from moving. No matter how hard I tried to push the walls, they would not budge. I was trapped inside of an invisible cube. What is happening? Where was I? And what is this place? Millions of questions emerged in my mind as I kept trying to find a way out of the cube. In the end, after 10 minutes of constantly trying, helpless, I could only sit down and stare at the children in the kindergarten playground. Maybe the key to getting free was outside of the cube. As I observed the kindergarten, I could not help but focus my attention on a certain area. More specifically, a certain young boy who looked to be around 5 years old. Disheveled, unkempt brown hair and dull eyes. As he swung on the swing of the garden of the kindergarten, the young boy kept staring in the distance, seemingly waiting for someone to pick him up. No matter how long he had to wait, he waited. Yet, despite 30 more minutes passing and most of the children leaving, no one picked him up. As I watched the young boy in the distance, my heart hurt as I could not help but wonder, who is he? That is Matthew. Abruptly turning my head, a youth with blue eyes and jet black hair appeared beside me. Staring in the distance, towards the young boy, a complicated expression appeared on his face. You. Smiling in my direction, he introduced himself. Nice to meet you, I am Ren. My mind blanked. I tried to find words to say, but it was to no avail as I could not say anything. What was the old Ren doing here? Wasn't he supposed to be dead? Was he not dead? My mind was in a current state of turmoil as I could not find any words to say. Did he even know who I was? Smiling at my reaction, Ren shook his head. There is no need for you to introduce yourself. I have been with you for the past 3 months, watching your every move. What? Shrugging his shoulders, Ren shook his head. Don't ask me, I do not know what happened either. I just suddenly found my consciousness watching everything that you were doing whilst I could not control my body. Wait, so you were within me watching everything I did since taking over your body? Smiling, Ren nodded. Yeah. My eyes opened wide. To think that someone was watching everything I was doing whilst I reincarnated here. But how? SHHHH. Just as I was about to speak, putting his finger on his mouth, he motioned me to be quiet as he pointed towards the kid I was previously watching. Let's not talk about that now. It is about time you learned about my past. Matthew, are you okay? As soon as the previous Ren stopped talking, out of nowhere, a young boy with jet black hair and blue eyes approached Matthew. Yeah. Smiling brightly and nodding his little head, Matthew kept his eyes towards the entrance of the kindergarten. Tapping Matthew on the shoulder, the black-haired boy excitedly said, "Let's play, Matthew. But my parents will come soon." "Yeah, then just play until they come. But they will get mad if they do not see me immediately." Looking around, pointing at the swings, the black-haired boy said, "Then let's just play here on the swings." Watching the two children play on the swings, I could not help but turn my head towards Ren's direction and ask, "Is that you?" Staring at the young boy with jet black hair and blue eyes playing with Matthew, Ren lightly nodded. "Yeah." Pointing towards the kid that the old Ren was playing with, I furrowed my brows. "And is that the same guy I met at the park?" Smiling, a trace of sadness appeared in Ren's eyes as he looked at the young Matthew. "Yeah, and he was my best friend." Taken aback, I could not help but look at Ren in shock. Remembering what had happened moments before appearing in this strange world, Matthew looked more like a bully rather than a best friend. How was someone like that ever been his friend? Best friend? Noticing the skepticism on my face, Ren smiled but did not elaborate. "Yeah." At that moment, as I was still in shock by the revelation, a black sedan entered the parking area of the kindergarten. Staring at the incoming sedan, Matthew happily stood up. Soon the back doors opened and a man and a woman got off of the vehicle. "Mom, Dad." Just as Matthew was a few feet away from them, raising his hand, the dad slapped him in the face. "I told you not to come running at us like that. You are an elite, you must keep your composure at all times." Holding back his tears, with his hand on his cheek, Matthew smiled weakly and nodded his head. Despite being hit, he seemed rather happy that his parents had shown up. "Here." Taking something out of his pocket, Matthew excitedly handed it to his father. It was a drawing he had made in class that depicted a man and a woman holding hands with a child. However, his father grabbed the picture and crumbled it and tossed it away. "Is this what you wasted your entire day doing? What a waste." Turning around and urging his wife to follow him, they both entered the car. Bye. Seeing his parents enter the car, Matthew secretly picked up the crumpled paper on the floor and entered the car. As he did, turning around, he cheerfully waved at Ren. "Bye, Ren." The scene cut and the world turned dark. Extending his hand forward, Ren swiped right and the world around me changed. Soon the world around me changed. The kindergarten turned itself into a classroom filled with students. Just as I was about to ask Ren about what was going on, a familiar voice disrupted me. "What happened, Matthew?" Running towards Matthew, Ren's figure appeared. As Ren took a better look at Matthew, he could not help but gasp. Matthew's face was bruised and his eyes were black. It looked like he had just been through hell. Moreover, Ren soon noticed Matthew's leg limping as he walked inside of the class. From the way it was swollen, it was evident that his leg was broken. He was not in a good state. Raising his hand up, Ren looked towards the teacher responsible for the class and said, "Teacher, Matthew needs to go to the infirmary immediately." Glancing at Matthew's battered figure for a split second, the class teacher disinterestedly shook his head. "He looks fine to me." Opening his eyes wide, Ren's voice could not help but raise a few pitches. "How does this look fine to you in any way?" Frowning, the teacher put the book he was holding down and in an aloof voice said, "Student Ren Dover will be given detention after school for talking back to teacher." "What?" Grabbing Ren's forearm, coughing a couple of times, Matthew shook his head. "Cough, cough, I am fine." But, smiling, Matthew weakly sat on his seat. "It is okay, they are too scared to anger my father." Cough. Once again, the scene changed. This time, the classroom remained the same however, everyone was older. "Did you hear? Apparently Matthew's mother died in an accident. His life was already miserable before, but look at him now, it is like he does not want to live anymore." Staring at the seat in the corner of the class where Matthew sat, every student in class whispered and pointed in his direction. "Matthew, are you okay?" Approaching Matthew, Ren sat next to him. However, despite trying everything to try to get his attention, Matthew's eyes remained hollow the entire time. His lips were dry, his skin was dry and his hair was a mess. It looked like he had thoroughly given up on life. "Matthew." Calling Matthew one last time, Matthew's eyes regained a bit of clarity as he glanced at Ren. "Ah, Ren. Are you okay?" After a short pause, Matthew smiled weakly and said, "Yeah, I am fine." As the bell that signaled for the end of the school rang, Matthew took his bag and directly left the class. Following Matthew, Ren tried to make sure he would not bump into anyone. He was extremely worried as from the way he was walking, he looked like a zombie. As they reached the entrance of the school, staring at Ren, Matthew waved goodbye to him and entered a black sedan. As he waved goodbye to Ren, a small tear dropped down from his right cheek. Because it was so subtle, only if one paid close attention would they notice. Bye, Ren. Inside of the invisible cube, watching Matthew entering the car, Ren's face beside me could not help but twist as he softly mumbled, I wished I had stopped him that day. Ever since that day, the Matthew I knew died. Chapter 87. Swoosh. Extending my hand forward and swiping right, the scene before me changed once again. This time, instead of a classroom, it was right outside Ren's house. Standing there, Ren and Matthew stood before each other. Compared to before, Matthew's demeanor was completely different. If before he was gloomy and lonely, he now looked like an outstanding and refined young man. His very presence screamed elegance. His warm eyes and voice would instantly cause everyone who met him to have a good impression of him. It was a stark contrast to before. Smiling, Matthew took out 2 transparent potions from his pocket and showed them to Ren. Hey Ren, my dad was extremely happy with my results recently, and he gave me 2 advanced potions. What? How did you even get a hold of such expensive potions? Opening his eyes wide, Ren could not help but look at the 2 potions with a hint of envy. It had to be noted that a single advanced potion could go for tens of millions of U. That was how expensive they were. Moreover, compared to intermediate ones, they were much more efficient. No wonder Ren was surprised. Scratching the back of his head and chuckling, Matthew said, well, I really did please my father this time. After he gave them to me, he said that it was a good investment into my future. Damn, I am getting jealous here. I have not even tried an intermediate potion, let alone an advanced one. Nodding his head multiple times and extending his hands, Matthew put both potions in Ren's hand. Yep, I know, that is why I am giving them to you. More precisely, give them to your parents. Stupefied, Ren's hands shook as he held onto those potions. With his eyes wide open, Ren's voice could not help but tremble. What are you doing? I am giving them to you. Dude, do you know how expensive these things are? What about you? Seeing Ren's state, Matthew could not help but laugh out loud. Ha ha ha, no worries. I already had one. It is the least I can do to repay your parents for having taken care of me over the years. If I had to be honest, they are like my second parents. Crack. Bullshit. Turning my head, I saw Ren beside me clenching his fist hard as his hands cracked. His face became incomparably dark as he stared at Matthew with pure hatred. Biting his lips, he coldly spat, if you truly cared about them like they were your second parents, you would not have, damn it. Confused, I wanted to ask what he meant by that, but I decided to just watch the scene before me unfold. I was bound to find the answer sooner or later. Staring at the 2 potions in his hands, Ren hesitated before looking back at Matthew and once again asking in a trembling voice, are you sure? Yeah, just take it. Staring at Matthew and noticing his earnest expression, Ren shook his head and sighed. All right, if you are so adamant about me taking them, refusing you will just be rude on my end. Ha ha ha, you have made the right choice. Thank your parents when you give them the potions. If it were not for them, I would not be the man I am today. Shaking his head, Ren smiled. Sure, I will. Waving his hand, with a big smile on his face, Matthew turned around and left the compound. As Matthew turned around, the smile on his face slowly faded. I am sorry, best friend. Swoosh. Without looking at me, swiping right, once again, the scenery around me changed. Glancing at Ren who was beside me, though he returned to his usual indifferent self, I could visibly see his body shaking with every passing scene. He was almost as if he was trying his best to not give in to his emotions. You, how could you? Kneeling on the ground, outside of what seemed to be a rooftop, Ren's figure appeared kneeling on the ground as he glared upwards. His eyes contained an unimaginable amount of hatred. How could I? Cuckoo, I do not know. I guess I was just bored. Staring at Ren's kneeling figure, Matthew tried to hold his laughter back, but he soon burst out laughing. Cuckoo, cuckoo, I am sorry Ren. I really had no choice. Cuckoo, ha 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 ha. Opening his eyes wide, Ren stared at Matthew who was laughing maniacally before him. How could you betray me like this? Bam. KHH. I can't. Turning his head away and placing his palm on the invisible wall, the memory paused. Clenching his teeth hard, Ren slowly spat. This was the day. Trembling all over, Ren's fist and jaw clenched tightly as he glared in Matthew's direction with pure hatred. This was the day my life was ruined. Voom. Soon a thick red bloodlust started exuding from Ren's body as his eyes became bloodshot. Frowning, and seeing Ren's current state, I grabbed his shoulder and tried to snap him out of it. Oi, calm down, explain to me what happened. Shua. Feeling his clothes getting tugged and forcefully trying to calm himself down, the bloodlust around Ren disappeared. Glancing in my direction, he said, Hugh, do you remember the potions he had given me in my previous memory? Yeah. Nodding my head, I remembered. How could I forget? Even I wanted to try advanced potions once. However, with the price each one went for, I could only admire them from the distance. They were cursed with a mindbreaker curse. Abruptly turning my head, I could not help but stare at Ren in shock. What? The mindbreaker curse? The mindbreaker curse, one of the strongest curses a demon could cast. Once cast, no matter how far, with a simple flick of their fingers, whoever was under the curse would die as soon as the demon deemed that they were no longer useful. It was an especially scary curse as it was undetectable. You would not realize you were cursed before it was already too late. A demon. Ha. As my thoughts paused there, opening my eyes widely, I could not help but stare at Matthew in shock. Seeing that I understood, glancing back towards Matthew, Ren slowly nodded. Yeah, Matthew had made a contract with a demon. What Staring at Ren for a couple of seconds, I tried to say something, but in the end, no words came out of my mouth. I do not know what happened, but ever since that last memory, Matthew changed. He became a completely different person. At first I thought he was trying his best to move on, but, trembling, Ren covered his mouth. In the end I only realized it too late. By the time I realized something strange in his behavior, he had already fallen into the depths of depression, and became a villain, completely losing his sense of reasoning. The best friend I knew was gone. Watching Ren struggle to speak, I remained silent. Who knew that he had such a deep backstory? His childhood friend whom he regarded as a brother turned into a villain, and in doing so cursed both his parents. Damn it. Glaring at Matthew's image in the distance, veins popped from Ren's forehead, as his eyes turned bloodshot. From that day, I was forced to do everything he asked me to do, be it sneak inside of my parents' room, to give him secret information regarding the guild operations, or any other sensitive information that cost the guild quite dearly. I did his bidding for him at the expense of my parents' guild. Turning around, and looking at me in the eyes, he shouted, because I trusted him so much. I was the reason why my parents' guild fell that hard. The 95 million you debt? All because of me leaking the secret deals that the guild was responsible for. All the friends I had made as soon as they noticed that my parents' guild was going downhill abandoned me. I soon became the school outcast. I was alone. I could not even glance at my parents in the eyes due to the immense guilt I felt every day. Every day was like hell to me. Pausing, Ren smiled. But it was not a smile of happiness, no. It was a smile full of sadness and sorrow. I did have some hope though. I somehow managed to get accepted into the lock. Suddenly, amidst the darkness, I saw a ray of hope, but that hope too was soon destroyed. D rank. That is what they graded my talent to be. Although my parents did not show it, I knew they were distraught with the news as they had just borrowed 30 million U from the guild with the excuse of making an investment towards my future. Glancing at the ground, Ren's eyes became hollow. His figure looked lonely and tragic. And you know what? Despite knowing I was not talented, they still loved me just as much as before. Moreover, they still decided to pay for the admission fee for the lock. That destroyed me, especially after what I had done. Placing his hand over where his heart was, Ren clenched it. With each passing second I lived, it felt like pieces of my heart were being torn. Peta. Grabbing onto my clothes, Ren stared at me as tears streamed down his cheeks. Take my body, I do not care. Heck, I do not care if I cease to exist after this, but please save them please. I beg you, I cannot. Phew. Exhaling, I closed my eyes, feeling Ren tugging my collar, as he desperately looked at me with hope in his eyes. I expected such a request. From the moment he spoke about his past, I knew this moment was about to come. However, I did not expect his story to be this tragic. The Mindbreaker Curse, one of the most notorious curses in the human domain. The one curse that has no cure, and the very same curse his parents have. Once someone was under the effect of Mindbreaker, their lives were no longer under their control. Only upon death would they be able to free themselves from the curse. Or at least that was until the latter half of the novel where Kevin manages to find the cure to the curse. I knew where to find the cure, but in the process, I would be completely destroying the plotline that I worked so hard to protect. A part of me wanted to just remain indifferent. However, memories of these past few days started flooding my mind like a broken dam. Specifically the warmth I felt these past few days. Although they were not my real parents, I could not forget the care that they had given me the past few days. Maybe my emotions were still under the influence of the old Ren, but, as the warm faces of my new family replayed in my mind, opening my eyes, I looked at Ren and smiled. All right. Chapter 88. The crescent moon high in the sky was gradually covered by dark, drifting clouds. Inside of a large park, the night lamps lit the surroundings, disconnecting the darkness that had spread throughout the environment. Sitting on a bench, the faint rhythmical breathing of a youth disrupted the tranquil and silent surroundings. Waking up, I found myself sitting on a bench in the middle of the park. Squinting my eyes to familiarize myself with the lighting coming from the lamps, I rubbed my forehead. Instantly, I recalled everything that had happened inside of my consciousness. As I did, I took a deep breath. To think Ren's story was so tragic. To have his own best friend turn into a villain, and in the process have him curse his very own parents, as well as blackmailing him into doing his bidding. Tragic was the perfect word to describe what he went through. Remembering Ren's lonely figure, as he went through his memories inside of my consciousness, I recalled focusing my attention towards his eyes. Those eyes filled with sorrow and loneliness as he shared his memories with me. Thinking back, all of this would not have happened if Matthew did not sign a pact with a demon and became a villain. As soon as he made a pact with a demon in exchange for power, Matthew lost control of his emotions. By letting his emotions overtake his sanity, Matthew must have discarded all his previous feelings for Ren and the people he was close with for the sake of that power. In doing so, he chose to destroy Ren's life. The one person that never abandoned him. Ring. As I was staring at the moon in deep thought, my phone rang. Looking at the phone log, I instantly noticed a large notification appearing before me. Mom has called 5 times. Seeing the notification, I instantly picked up the phone. Ren, where have you been? As I answered the call, a loud voice escaped from the speakers of the phone, and without skipping a beat, I moved the phone away from my ear. As I had seen the caller ID, I already knew this was going to happen. After making sure my mother calmed down, and putting the phone back to my ear, I responded. I am actually at the park at the moment. At the park? Well, I was training, and I somehow lost track of time. In the end, that is the excuse I came up with. Since I was caught off guard by the call, that was the most plausible excuse I could use to avoid arousing any suspicion from her. Fortunately, she did not press any further and sighed. Sigh, what am I going to do with you? All right, hurry up and come back home, or else there will not be dinner for you. All right, be there soon. Be quick. Understood. Tack. Hanging up the phone, I put it in my pocket and stood up, as it was time to head back home. The walk home was not long, about 5 minutes. It was short and relaxing, especially with the autumn wind lightly blowing against my clothes, refreshing my mind. Midway through my journey home, I could not help but look back at my decision. Was I really going to interfere with the plotline for the sake of a few individuals whom I just met for a few days? Yeah, Ren's emotions that dwelled inside of me had somewhat affected my decision-making process. Maybe I was impulsive when answering Ren, but a part of me feels that that was not the only reason that prompted me to make a move. There was something else, but I just could not place my finger on it. Only with due time will I be able to determine what I was feeling. If it were the old me, I would have refused Ren's request without hesitation, and this mainly had to do with my personality. There was a reason why I always wanted to keep the plotline intact. Control. That is what mattered to me. I was fine with the plotline changing as long as the major events did not change, at least to the point where I still had a general idea of what was to come in the future. I guess it mostly had to do with my personality, but I just wanted everything to be under my control. I did not like when things did not go as I dictated. I disliked being put into situations where I was not in control of the flow, especially if my meddling would result in the Demon King appearing way earlier than he should have. If that happened, then all the preparation I had made in order to fight him would become useless. Maybe if I was strong like Kevin I would not have cared, but I was not. For someone like me, every little detail mattered. If I suddenly took a cheat item, and my action resulted in Kevin's death in the process, what was I supposed to do? Replace him? No, that was not something I was willing to do. I was not someone who wanted to bear the responsibility of saving the world. That responsibility weighed heavier than anyone could possibly imagine. I was no hero, nor did I wish to become one. I did not have a grand goal or anything like that per se. As long as the universe did not get destroyed by the hands of the Demon King, I was content. That is why I was so obsessed with keeping the plotline fixed, so that I could fight the Demon King with the most optimal preparations. Sighing, I could only lament the fact that that was no longer possible, especially since I needed to find the cure for the Mindbreaker curse, an extremely terrifying curse that dictated someone's life and death. In the future, towards the ending of the second volume, Kevin and his friend would be put in a position where they would have to find the cure for the curse at all cost. In the process of finding the cure, they will go through many trials that will shape their character, as well as improve their strength. Many schemes made by the demons would end up being destroyed in the process. Though it was not the most important arc, it was still very important for their character development. If I chose to go find the cure for the curse, my actions would definitely cause a butterfly effect, but I just was not sure how big. Fortunately, time was on my side. Because my parents' guild was already on the verge of collapse, Matthew had no use for me. The only reason he used to blackmail the old Ren was so that he could weaken my parents' guild. Although the old Ren did not tell me, I could pretty much guess the motives behind Matthew's blackmailing. He wanted to absorb Galsicus. With the fact that his father owned a gold-graded guild, wanting to absorb smaller silver-graded guilds was not strange. In fact, it was quite common. However, the process usually took a very long time, hence why they try to use all sorts of dirty tricks in the book to force them to sell the guild. Knowing this fact, I knew that I was not pressed for time. Before he would completely kill my parents, due to them no longer having any use, he would first need to completely absorb Galsicus, which by my estimation would take approximately 1 year. And this was ideal since I needed to make a lot of preparations. Finding the cure for the curse was not going to be easy. No, I would say it would probably be one of the most dangerous trips I would ever make. However, it would not be all for nothing. In fact, the trip would not just consist of me finding a cure. Perhaps this was the other reason why I chose to accept Ren's request, but there was an item I was extremely interested in, specifically one that was tailor-made for one of the future members of my mercenary group. Named after Artemis, the goddess of animals, the ultimate beast tamer cheat item. The Flute of Artemis, an item that allowed beast tamers to control multiple beasts at a time. The item that helped Ava's monster tamer class shine in the original novel, prompting her into becoming one of the strongest humans in the novel. Well, although I said all of that, there was just one teeny tiny problem. The place I wanted to go to get the cure was not actually on Earth. Chapter 89. Casa, Headquarters. Here are all the files of the people you requested for me to find. Alright, thanks. Without glancing at Small Snake on my left, I took the files from his hand and threw them on the desk I was currently working on. A week had passed since I learned about Ren's past, and nothing changed. The renovations for the warehouse were pretty much done. With my limited budget, I could only redecorate the place to make it look more presentable, but there really wasn't any high-tech equipment nor training rooms here yet. I was too poor for that. What are you doing? Seeing me discard the files he had just given me, rolling his eyes, Small Snake couldn't help but ask. I'm making preparations. Preparations for? Well, let's just say that in 4 months, I'll be going on a long trip with a couple of people. Frowning, Small Snake couldn't help but tilt his head in confusion. If it's in 4 months, why do you need to start making preparations now? You wouldn't believe me even if I told you. I will be going to find a cure for a curse that has been universally acknowledged as something that didn't have a cure, was what I wanted to say, but he wouldn't believe me even if I told him so. Moreover, I also didn't tell him that I was not going to be on Earth throughout that whole trip, so may as well just dodge the question. Speechless, Small Snake could only pinch the middle of his brows as he continued. Anyhow, I did look at the profiles of the people you had previously recommended to join our mercenary group, and I still don't understand why you want them. Taking the file that I threw on the desk, Small Snake opened it and took out 3 profiles. I sort of understand why you want to recruit Ryan Palive, but why a monster tamer and an old mercenary? Pointing towards Eva's and Leopold's files, Small Snake frowned. Isn't the monster tamer class useless since they can only control one beast? Moreover, from what I've been told, the beast they tame can't even increase in strength. Without glancing at Small Snake, I continued scribbling on a piece of paper. What he said wasn't wrong. Monster tamers weren't very sought after due to their limitations with regards to how many beasts they could tame. Normally 1, on rare occasions 2. Moreover, the beasts that they could tame couldn't become stronger. Their strength was fixed, meaning that if you tamed a G-ranked beast, that was it. No matter how much food you fed to it, or how much time you spent training it, the beast was forever going to stay at G rank. Unless you got a new one, you couldn't raise its rank. And that's where the real problem laid. The expenses needed to sustain a monster tamer were astronomical. The costs of capturing and feeding an S-ranked beast probably amounted to the same costs needed to raise multiple S-ranked heroes. It just wasn't worth it. Don't even get me started about the mercenary. Seeing that I was still scribbling stuff, Small Snake continued. From what I've found in the files, he seems to be a regular member with seemingly no out. Stop. Sigh. Putting my pen down, I leaned on my chair and looked at Small Snake and sighed. Small Snake, just trust me. I know what I'm doing. Flick. Flicking the pen that was rolling down on my paper, I continued. You think I would just choose random people without having put much thought into it? Shaking his head, Small Snake responded. No. Then what's the point of asking? Just wait and I will prove to you that my judgment wasn't wrong. Frowning for a second, Small Snake eventually nodded his head. All right. Seeing Small Snake nod, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Although Small Snake was a very capable person, he tended to question my every decision. Well, he wasn't wrong in doing so. I mean, apart from the CB Pharmaceuticals incident, he hasn't really seen the full extent of my abilities. Nor did he know I was the author of this novel. It wasn't wrong of him to doubt me, especially since he didn't know what I had in store for the members I was planning on recruiting. In the end, with due time, Small Snake will eventually understand what I was doing. Any other problems? Yes, actually. Smiling, my brows twitched. You weren't supposed to answer that. Shaking his head and ignoring my rumbling, Small Snake continued. According to the information inside of the files, Ryan Palive, the 12-year-old kid that you were keen on recruiting, is currently being scouted by a gold-graded guild. Gold-graded? Yeah. Resting my face on my hand, I softly mumbled. This is indeed a problem. A gold-graded guild. I knew that Ryan was currently being scouted by a gold-graded guild, but that still didn't change the fact that this was a problem. Guilds were divided into 5 different ranks: bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and diamond. In order for a guild to be classified in the gold ranks, it meant that they had to at least have someone who was B ranked in their guild. For platinum, they had to have at least one A ranked hero, and for diamond B ranked. So far the strongest opponent I faced was around D rank, and that was already with me exploiting openings that others had made for me. Fighting against a B rank with my current strength was suicidal. As my thoughts paused this far, a smile appeared on my face. But who said anything about me fighting against them openly? Turning my attention back to Small Snake, I ordered. Small Snake, send me all of the information regarding the gold-graded guild that wants to recruit my future member. From their enemies, details regarding their guild master, the top executives as well as their families. Make sure you miss nothing. I want to know their habits, their friends, their enemies, everything. What? Frowning, Small Snake couldn't but be even more confused. Just what would he need all that information for? Was he planning on blackmailing them? There's no way he thought the top executives of a gold-graded guild would think people wouldn't target their families. The more Ren spoke, the more Small Snake became confused. Smiling at Small Snake's confused face, I interlocked my fingers and rested my chin on them. Glancing at him, I asked, Small Snake, what do you do when you find yourself against an opponent who is way stronger than you? You run. Shaking my head, I couldn't help but look at Small Snake in disapproval. Small Snake, grow some balls. What are you? Raising my hand, I stopped him from speaking. Small Snake, you don't have to be the strongest person in the world in order to beat a strong opponent. No. Raising my finger, I pointed towards my head. Regardless of how strong someone is, if they can't outsmart you, they can never win. Unless they had power that was overwhelming to the point no trickery nor scheme could win, there was always a solution. You just need to find that solution. Voom. Tapping on my watch, a huge chessboard appeared on top of my desk. Yawning, I stretched my back and started a game. As I did, I started speaking. Unless you're a god, no being is perfect. Tack. Moving my pawn forward to start the game, I glanced at Small Snake. Everyone has a weakness, regardless of how much they try to hide it. Be it big or small, hidden or not hidden, they all have a weakness. Take Achilles for example. Despite the fact that he was invulnerable to anything, as soon as an arrow pierced his weakness, the heel, he like everyone else on the battlefield died. Tack, tack, tack. As I talked, in real time, the pieces on the chessboard automatically moved, matching my tempo. Regardless of how strong your opponent was, once you found their weakness you could exploit it to your advantage. Tack. As I talked, focusing my mind on the game, I looked at the ever-changing pieces, and made the appropriate moves. The more time passed, the lower the number of pieces on the board remained. Staring at the game before him, Small Snake looked at my calm face and couldn't help but ask, "But what if you don't know what their weakness is?" Looking at Small Snake, I smirked. "Can't find it? Then, just make one." Moving the rook all the way down the now empty board, it soon appeared below another rook, blocking the defenseless king. Be it through the use of deception, schemes, money, connections, information, if used well, an opening will definitely appear, and then, tack, checkmate, game over, you won. As Small Snake listened, watching the game unfold before his eyes, although he agreed somewhat, he couldn't help but frown. "Are you saying that you alone can go against a gold-graded guild?" Smiling mysteriously, I didn't answer. "In 2 days you'll know." After a bit of silence, Small Snake nodded his head. "All right, I'm very curious of what you'll do." Small Snake was indeed curious. The reason why he joined the mercenary group was mainly out of his own curiosity. If he thought about it, apart from the pharmaceuticals incident, he never really saw Ren doing anything grand. Sure, the fact that he knew his circumstances regarding the monolith has also shocked him, but that didn't mean he fully trusted Ren's abilities. He talked a lot, but he never really proved to him that his decision was worthy of his trust. Perhaps this could be a great opportunity to be able to determine if his decision in joining him was the right decision. Thinking thus far, Small Snake sighed and switched the topic. "Anyhow, regarding the mercenary Leopold Ray, I think we should be able to recruit him if we just pay him enough money. He is a mercenary after all, but there's just one problem." Frowning, my mouth twitched. How come there was a problem for everything? Why couldn't something just go smoothly for once? Sighing and massaging my forehead, I asked, "What is it?" Pausing and looking at me in the eyes, Small Snake hesitated for a moment before saying, "We don't have any money." Silence swept the warehouse. Come, don't worry about it. I'll solve it by the end of the week." Disrupting the silence, coughing to hide my embarrassment, I leaned on my chair. Money. Fucking money. Whenever I wanted to do something, money was always the first thing that troubled me. With the cost for my training, warehouse renovations, taxes, and other useless expenses I was now poor. There was just never enough money. I did have a couple of short-term solutions that would allow me to make a lot of money, but in the end, if I wanted to sustain a whole mercenary group, I needed to think more broadly. I need to create a steady source of income. And fortunately for me, a plan had already started formulating in my head. Chapter 90. A steady source of income. That is what I needed. Although stocks could help me make a lot of money, in the end, it was not really a long-term solution. That mainly had to do with the fact that the time frame for each event differed greatly. There was not really going to be another incident similar to that of CB Pharmaceuticals where I could make quick cash in a span of a few days. At least not anytime soon. Moreover, with the fact that the plotline was slowly changing, I was not even sure whether the events would continue to go as the story dictated. It was no longer the most optimal option that I could take to make money. In the end, after a lot of thinking, I came up with a solution. Creating my own company. With me being the creator of this world, I obviously knew a lot of things, especially with regards to the world. From stocks, fashion trends, and products that would sweep the market in the future, I knew everything. With that being the case, a plan had already started formulating in my head. I was going to create a business empire that on paper was not affiliated with my mercenary organization, but in reality, was secretly funding our every endeavor. With this, as both my mercenary organization and my business grew, the stronger my influence inside of Ashton City would become. I had realized that just focusing on keeping the plotline intact was useless. No one knew what would happen in the future, especially since I tended to do things that in a way changed the plotline. It was too passive of an approach. I should not just rely on the security that the plotline gave me in order to fight the Demon King. I needed to have reassurances. I needed something to support me. I needed to secretly grow an empire that would rival the likes of the Union. One that was there yet not there. A secret organization that ruled the shadows. And when everything was set in place, everything would be within my grasp. Rather than be a chess piece, be the one that moves the chess piece. By the time the Demon King descended, I would have made enough preparations to fight back. Yes, that is what I had to do. However, although this sounded nice and all, I needed to approach this carefully. One step at a time. Like they all say, Rome was not built in a day. My first goal right now was to establish a functioning business. I already had several products in mind that I could introduce in the market, however. That was not my first priority. My first priority was finding a sponsor. Honestly, with me having read a lot of novels in my time, I instantly knew what would happen as soon as the products I introduced hit the market. It would instantly attract the attention of the big hots. They would instantly either try to remove the company from the market or outright threaten them. This was just how the world worked. And honestly, I was not too keen on wasting my time dealing with these sorts of problems. That is why a sponsor was necessary, one that was big enough to deter the competition from finding trouble, and I knew exactly the right person to ask. As the sun brightly lit the surroundings, inside of a busy train station, an air train slowly descended towards one of the platforms of the station. Vuyum. Stepping off the air train, I inhaled the fresh autumn air that lingered in the atmosphere. This is the right station, right? Checking my phone, I double-checked with the information Small Snake sent me, and made sure I was in the right location. Northern District, Libonsa Station. Looking at the station sign, and confirming I was in the right location, I headed out of the station. As I walked out, tapping on my phone, I once again checked Ryan's profile. The name was Ryan Palive, age 12, job none, potential S, and his status was currently unranked. He lived with his single mother inside of a worn-down one-bedroom apartment. He was currently being eyed by the gold-graded guild, Luxius. He had been approached multiple times with no success. However, it seemed like they currently had a breakthrough as the mother and son duo had scheduled to make an appointment with them in the next few days at their house. Looking at the information, I looked at the date on which the appointment was made. Today, Fortunately, I was not late and Ryan had still not been recruited by the gold-graded guild. He was going to be an essential member of my mercenary group, and I could not afford for him to tragically die like in the story. Bishop, that is the position I had planned on giving him. With him and Small Snake controlling the behind-the-scenes of the mercenary group, I did not have to worry about our operations failing. Just imagining myself doing missions in the fastest and most efficient way possible sent shivers down my spine. With one being meticulous and organized whilst the other was calculating and perceptive, all sorts of variables during the missions would instantly be analyzed by both of them. Ah, what a frightening duo. Knock, knock. Outside of a rundown apartment complex, two muscular men wearing a black suit and a black tie knocked on the door of one of the apartments. Who is it? A couple of seconds after the knock was heard, a crisp and pleasant voice echoed from the other side of the door. Ma'am, we are from the Luxius Guild. We are here for your answer regarding the recruitment of your son Ryan Palive, said one of the men in the black suit. Hearing that the individuals were from the Luxius Guild, after a short pause, the sound of rushed footsteps rumbled through the other side of the door. Ah yes. Clank. Opening the door, a middle-aged lady, with glossy black hair, and a few wrinkles on the corner of her eyes appeared in front of the two individuals dressed in black suits. Trembling, she politely bowed in front of them and said, "Thank you for coming." Nodding his head, one of the two individuals indifferently glanced at the lady before getting straight to the point. "Sure, have you considered our proposal?" Freezing for a split second, the lady tried to hide her trembling hand and curtly bowed one more time. "I am sorry, he is still 12 years old. I know that my son is very smart, but I want for him to have a normal childhood." "I see." Nodding his head, the individual on the right looked at the individual on the left. Glancing back, they remained silent for a couple of seconds before nodding their heads. "We understand, ma'am." "Really?" Looking up, and seeing the two men dressed in suits nod their heads, the middle-aged lady sighed in relief. "Thank you very much for..." Before the lady could finish speaking, a sudden, piercing scream echoed through the hallway. Before the lady could finish speaking, an overbearing pressure bore down on her. Instantly she fell to the ground. "I guess we have to do this the hard way, do we not?" Staring at the lady on the ground, one of two individuals dressed in a suit glanced at the entrance of the house. Peeking his head from behind the door, a young child with black hair looked towards the two individuals dressed in black standing in front of the door. His eyes soon landed on his mom, who was on the ground unable to move. Shocked, he could not help but scream, "Mom, is that him?" Staring at the young kid peeking from behind the door of the house, the two individuals looked at each other. They soon smiled. Noticing their expression, Ryan's mom could not help but look towards Ryan as she shouted, "Ryan, close the door. Do it." Bam. Blocking the door with his foot, a large shadow cast over both Ryan and the middle-aged lady. "Ma'am, I think you need to put more thought into that. Oh my, would you look at this?" Just as the lady was about to despair, disrupting their conversation, a cheerful voice entered everyone's ears. As two arms hooked on the shoulders of the two individuals dressed in black suits, a youth with jet black hair and blue eyes leisurely looked at them with a warm yet leisurely smile. "My friends, how about you try to recruit me instead? I am very good with the sword." Chapter 91. A day prior to my meeting with Ryan, I sat inside of a cafe, frowning as I looked through the files that Small Snake had sent me. Although I teased and abused Small Snake quite a bit, I could not deny how capable he was. Within a day, I had every little detail regarding Luxius I could ever hope to have. I had information on basically everyone, from the top members to the lowest. Small Snake also sent me a long list of information regarding the guilds that they were not on good terms with. As I looked through their enemy guilds, one of them caught my attention, Sword of Light. This was another gold-graded guild located not far from Luxius. Compared to the other guilds, their enmity against Luxius was not actually between the guild masters. They did not really have any significant problems with each other. However, one piece of info caught my attention. The conflict was between the sons of both guild masters, Jacob Reed and Nolan Valdev. This was a very interesting piece of news. The conflict was not between the two guild masters, but in fact between their sons, or more like the guild heirs. Moreover, as I looked through the information regarding their conflicts, a smile appeared on my face. A plan had already started formulating inside of my mind. Without pause, I discarded every other file other than those of Luxious and Sword of Light. I had decided they were now going to be my main focus. Taking out a piece of paper, I drew 2 circles, one signaling Luxious and the other signaling Sword of Light. Like a mind map, I drew little branches coming out from each circle. With each branch, I wrote small notes. For the next 2 hours, I continuously drew different branches coming out from each circle. Soon, the paper was filled to the brim with a massive web of information. Phew. Putting my pen down, I took a deep breath. I was done. I had written everything important regarding both guilds in hopes of finding links between them. Midway through, I found what I wanted. This was the one link that would allow me to flawlessly execute my plan. Hee hee. Chuckling, I bit the tip of my pen. If everything went as I predicted, Luxious would completely forget everything regarding Ryan and his potential. This would allow me to recruit him peacefully. Once again looking at the mind map, a smile appeared on my face. Everything was starting to come together. My goal was not to destroy a gold-graded guild. That would bring too much unnecessary attention. My goal right now was to change their current focus. I needed to redirect it away from Ryan and towards somewhere else. Putting the mind map away, I texted Small Snake and asked him to purchase a few things. I then proceeded to send him 4 photos with instructions on them. Sending the photos to Small Snake, I took Ryan's profile out and checked his current situation. Soon, my eyes landed on an important piece of information. The target had made an appointment to meet with Luxious at the target house on November 25, 2055, early morning. November 25th. Isn't that tomorrow? Checking the date, I realized that tomorrow Ryan would be meeting with Luxious. That works. Pausing and checking my phone, I realized that tomorrow was the perfect time to start the plan I had come up with. Scrolling through my phone, I quickly booked an air train for tomorrow. Cleaning up my desk, I stood up and left the cafe. I guess I won't be sleeping tonight. Back to the present. My friends, how about you try to recruit me instead? I am very good with the sword. Hooking my arms around the 2 individuals wearing black suits, I winked at them. Who are you, KHH? Flabbergasted, the 2 individuals tried to turn their heads to get a better look at me. However, I increased the grip on their necks. I certainly was not going to let them see my face. KHHH. Feeling the grip on their necks tighten, the 2 individuals struggled to breathe. Desperate, they used both arms to try and pull me away. As they pulled, veins appeared on their foreheads. Yet, despite how much they struggled, my arms would not budge. As time passed, their struggles weakened. Just as they were about to give up, one of the individuals caught sight of something hidden beneath one of my sleeves. An emblem of a bull with a cross. As soon as he saw the emblem, the air around him intensified, and he fully released his G-ranked pressure. It was almost as if he had regained all of his energy. Futile effort. Noticing the change, I shook my head. Now that I was F+ ranked, such low pressure did not even tickle me. Lowering my head, I looked at the 2 men in my arms. Fellas, let me be honest with you. I am dirt poor at the moment, so please put in a good word to your boss. I really cannot afford to be unemployed right now. Struggling to speak, one of the individuals looked at me and said, KH. IKN, who sent you? What? Lowering my head to better understand what they were saying, I innocently looked at the 2 individuals. Their faces were now incredibly red. KHH. As my frown deepened, I lowered my head even further. Hey, say something, I cannot hear you. Hearing nothing, I soon noticed that their eyes had rolled back. They had passed out. Releasing my grip, their bodies fell to the ground with a large thud. Scratching my head, I looked at the 2 individuals on the floor. I guess I held onto them a little bit too tightly. With me being a rank higher than them, they were totally helpless. I guess ranks do make that much of a difference. They could not even put up a fight against my grip. With that, a smile appeared on my face as I glanced at Ryan, who was hiding behind his mom. Are you guys okay? Seeing me look at them, the mother and son flinched slightly. Smiling apologetically, I extended my hand to help them up. I am sorry you had to see that. Warily glancing at my hand, the mother moved forward and hid Ryan behind her. What do you want from us? Not minding their apprehension, I looked at Ryan, who was hiding behind his mother, and awkwardly said, well, how should I say this? I am also here to recruit Ryan. You are the same as them. Glaring and pointing at me, Ryan's mom desperately hugged Ryan, trying to protect him. Please do not misunderstand. Please hear my offer out first. Noticing the situation turning for the worse, I raised my hands and backed off. It was better if I did not push it. Whilst still holding Ryan, the mother spoke. We will not accept any offer. Please leave. Okay. Seeing how hostile they were, I made my way out of the house. I knew that negotiating with them at the moment would be fruitless. I will leave this here. Check it out if you have time. Of course, just because I was leaving did not mean I was giving up. Taking a file from my dimensional space, I placed it on the ground. Glancing at Ryan and his mother, I pointed towards the file. In case you are bored, I left the contract I was planning on offering Ryan. If you choose to accept my offer, please call the number inside the papers. If you wish to refuse, just ignore everything that happened. Though I do have to say that working with me would be much better than working with Luxious. Finished with what I wanted to say, I grabbed the 2 individuals on the floor. I opened the door with my foot and headed out. All right, I have wasted enough of your time. Goodbye now. Closing the door behind me, a faint smile appeared on my lips. Glancing at the 2 individuals in my arms, I shook my head and brought them with me. I still had a use for them. Chapter 92. Fio. Sitting on my desk, I blew on the bangs of my hair. As I was doing so, from time to time, I would check my phone. Nothing yet, ha. After 10 minutes of continuously checking my phone, I sighed. It looks like things are progressing more slowly than I predicted. What are you doing? Small Snake. Glancing towards Small Snake who had just arrived, I leaned back on my chair and continued to blow on the bangs of my hair. Noticing my attitude, Small Snake didn't even bother to ask what I was doing. Has everything with the Luxus Guild been sorted? Checking my watch, without glancing at Small Snake, I said, not yet. Should be soon though. How soon? Thinking for a bit, I said, I would say in about an hour or so. Raising his brow, Small Snake couldn't help but ask, an hour? Then is everything that is happening outside all because of you? With my eyes half open, I briefly glanced at Small Snake. I guess you could say that. Frowning, Small Snake paused before he said, just what the hell did you do? It's a bit of a long story. Voom. Tapping on my phone, a huge chessboard appeared before me and Small Snake. Fancy a game of chess while I recount? To be honest, I'm on the verge of passing out from boredom. Glancing at the chessboard, Small Snake sighed and sat in front of me. Chess? Regular rules? Yup, all right. Nodding his head, Small Snake stared at the chessboard before him. He was currently using the black pieces, thus he would have to start after I moved my piece. So, tell me what you did? What I did. Staring at the chessboard for a brief moment, I looked at Small Snake and smiled. I just moved the pieces one at a time. Frowning, Small Snake couldn't help but shake his head. I don't know what you mean by that, but you seriously have a chess complex. I do. I guess you aren't wrong. Taken aback for a moment, I couldn't find any words to refute his statement. Now that I thought about it, I really did, didn't I? From the guild name and structure to the way I talked, I made a lot of chess references. I guess I really did have some sort of chess complex. Tack. Sighing, moving my pawn forward, I smiled. Let's begin. Standing in line, outside of a black sedan, parked below a tall skyscraper, 5 individuals wearing black suits and sunglasses stood upright. Each individual vigilantly looked towards their surroundings, as none dared to speak a word to each other. It was evident that they were professionals. Clank. Coming out from the skyscraper entrance, a youth wearing an iron designer t-shirt and black pants headed straight for the black sedan. As he walked down the stairs towards the sedan, the bodyguards couldn't help but notice an elegant yet prideful bearing coming out from the youth's body, almost as if he was alone, untouchable phoenix. Nodding his head towards the guards, the youth opened the door of the car and entered. Following his entrance, from all sides, the guards too entered the car. Sitting at the front, wearing white gloves, the driver of the car turned around and politely smiled towards Nolan. Young master, where would you like to go? Playing with his phone, Nolan disinterestedly said, not sure, do you have any suggestions? Smiling, the driver said, young master Nolan, according to some sources, it seems that Jacob from the Luxus Guild is currently staying in the Ola Bar in Palter Street, not so far from here. Listening to the information, taking his eyes off of his phone, a smile appeared on Nolan's face. Jacob is there, That is indeed interesting. All right, let's go there. Nodding his head, a trace of amusement appeared in Nolan's eyes. I'll show that bastard why he shouldn't have messed with me. Smiling, the driver nodded his head and turned his focus back on the wheel. Vroom. Soon the car silently sped into the distance. Tack. Moving a pawn forward, Small Snake glanced at me and asked, so you disguised yourself as a driver? Is that the identity of one of the people you asked me to make a face mask of? Tack. Moving another one of my pawns, I nodded my head. Spot on. Tack. Staring at the chessboard and pondering for a second, Small Snake moved a pawn and nodded his head. I sort of get the gist of the situation now. Tack. Without glancing at him, nor showing any sign of shock, I raised my brow and asked, oh, what did you figure out? Tack. Placing another pawn down, Small Snake looked at me before saying, your plan is to instigate a conflict between the two guilds by creating conflict between the two heirs. This way, both guilds will have an excuse to fight each other. But although the plan sounds solid, it's honestly full of holes. Tack. Placing my pawn down, I smiled at Small Snake. Well, you aren't entirely wrong about the fact that I am indeed trying to create a conflict between the two of them, but that isn't my main goal. Pausing, Small Snake glanced at me and frowned. Really? Then what is it? Smiling, I didn't respond. Tack. Taking the knight, I moved it upwards in an L shape. You'll see soon. After a 20-minute drive, arriving at the location, Nolan alongside his 5 guards exited the vehicle. So did the driver. Voom, voom, voom. As they inched closer, the loud rumbling music coming from the nightclub reverberated throughout the whole surroundings, shaking the ground beneath them. Please excuse me. Just as they were about to enter the nightclub, a bulky individual stopped them at the entrance. Please provide an ID. Just as one of the guards was about to protest, raising his hands, Nolan shook his head and took out an ID from his pocket. Here. Handing it to the guard, Nolan smiled politely. A couple of seconds after, coming back from having checked the card, the guard flusteredly gave it back to Nolan. Ah, Mr. Nolan, I apologize for not recognizing you immediately. Haha, it's okay, no worries. Laughing, Nolan took the card back and made his way towards the club. Entering the nightclub, Nolan looked left and right until finally, after a couple of seconds, he managed to spot a youth sitting in the corner of the place. Walking up to the youth, Nolan smirked as he looked down on him. Fancy seeing you here, Jacob. Looking up, a fairly handsome youth with fair skin and sharp brows looked in Nolan's direction. Recognizing him, clenching his teeth, he hatefully spat, "Nolan. Hee hee, long time no see, buddy." As the two stared at each other, sparks appeared between their eyes. Soon the air around the nightclub started becoming tense. Nolan and Jacob had only known each other for about a year. However, during the year they met, they had continuously targeted each other, always trying to look for trouble for one another. Their conflicts didn't particularly start big. In fact, the reason why they fought in the first place wasn't anything particularly exciting. The reason why they disliked each other was simply because at the time they met, they were each with a friend who had some enmity with the other's friend. Naturally, since they were their friends' enemies, they were their enemies too. With that, standing up for their friends, the two stood on the opposite side of each other, and thus they became enemies, and ever since then, their conflicts have never ended. Because they were both respectively heirs to a gold-graded guild, their pride was naturally inflated. As such, until there was a clear winner between them, they were always destined to fight against each other. Thus, since their first meeting, they had always been trying to look for trouble for one another until the other gave up or admitted defeat. Standing up, Jacob's figure, which was more robust and taller than Nolan's, looked down on him. "You came here to redeem yourself for your last loss." Raising his brow, Nolan looked up at Jacob. Smirking, he said, "What loss? I clearly remember beating the crap out of you. Remember how you broke your nose?" As Jacob and Nolan stood face to face, their auras progressively intensified. "Stop making stuff up." "Oh, I remember taking photos of your pathetic self. If you want, I can send them to you later." "You dare? You think I'm scared of you?" Voom, voom. Soon, two F-ranked auras swept the nightclub. Instantly, the atmosphere around the bar became tense. Both sides were currently on a standoff, but neither moved. Everyone that was in the bar, sensing the atmosphere, either left or distanced themselves from Nolan and Jacob. Around them, the guards stood firm. Just as both sides were about to make a move, a subtle clicking sound resounded across the space. Following that, the whole room died white for a split second, almost as if a bolt of lightning had descended. Click. Following the clicking sound, an arm flew in the air. Soon after, the room froze. No one spoke a word. Everything happened so fast that no one caught sight of what happened and who did it. Too fast. Huiruaa. Soon a blood-curdling scream broke the silence as Jacob held onto the area where his arm used to be. Young Master Jacob. Panicked, the guards around Jacob immediately ran in his direction. Taking out a couple of potions, they immediately fed them to him in hopes of stopping the bleeding. "You dare." With bloodshot eyes, holding onto his arm, Jacob glared intensely towards Nolan. His eyes were that of pure undisputed hatred. Killing intent permeated the air. "Wait, that wasn't us." Shocked, Nolan took a few steps back. He really had no idea what had happened. One moment Jacob was standing before him, the next his arm flew in the air. "How dare you?" Glancing towards his guards, Jacob, using his only hand, pointed towards Nolan and shouted, "Attack them, it's an order. I don't care what you do, make sure he dies." "Yes." Heeding Jacob's order, the guards instantly attacked. Boom. Soon an explosion reverberated across the club as dust and debris flew everywhere. Creak. As explosions reverberated throughout the nightclub, and the two parties fought. Exiting from the back of the nightclub, wearing a black suit and white gloves, Nolan's driver exited the nightclub from the back door. Smiling, he mumbled, "Mission accomplished." Extending his hand over his head, a mask slowly peeled off of his face. Clay. Underneath the moonlight, his real face was revealed. Smirking, the driver walked over to a secluded area of a parking lot and removed a big white sheet, revealing a slick black bike. Jumping on top of the bike, the individual sat on the bike and sped off in the distance. Vroom. However, as he took off into the distance with his bike, what he didn't notice was a small camera secretly hidden in the corner of the nightclub. It recorded everything, from the moment he exited the building, to the very moment he took off his mask, and the face beneath it was revealed. Chapter 93. Hold up. Just as Small Snake was about to place his piece down, he frowned. "Did you just say that a camera caught you taking off your mask?" Lazily supporting my chin with my arm, I nodded. "Yup." Confused, Small Snake tilted his head and frowned. "Isn't that bad?" "I mean." Seeing Small Snake's confusion, before he could continue, I cut him off. "Well, that is if what they saw was my real face." Coming to an understanding, Small Snake's brows relaxed. "Ah, so you didn't reveal your face?" Nodding my head, I pointed at the board, urging for him to continue. "Don't you remember the photos I sent you? The ones you used to create multiple face masks for me?" Tack. Moving one of the pieces, Small Snake nodded his head. "Yeah, he did." Although he didn't know who the people in the photos were, Small Snake remembered receiving a text a couple of days ago regarding the creation of a couple of skin masks. With current technology, creating such highly detailed masks didn't take much, so he had it promptly made the next day. Seeing that he understood, I lethargically said, "Well, I was wearing two at that time." Tack. With one of my eyes closed, I moved my bishop diagonally across the board. "I see, and whose mask does the other one belong to?" Hearing his question, I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I answered with another question. "Small Snake, who do you think stands to gain the most from the conflict between Sword of Light and Luxus?" Getting answered back with a question, Small Snake thought for a moment before hesitantly saying, "The one who wins between them." Shaking my head, I lightly smiled. Tut, 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 not necessarily true. Tack. Moving one of his pieces, Small Snake frowned. Then who? Smiling, I glanced at him and said, have you ever heard of the term, the mantis stalks the cicada unaware of the oriole behind? Nodding his head, pausing and thinking for a moment, Small Snake's eyes widened. You don't mean, tack. Yup, Luxus headquarters, 80th floor. Overlooking the city from the tinted windows of the high-rise building, a tall muscular man interlocked his fingers behind his back. A cold and indifferent aura exuded from his body. Briefly glancing towards the bottom of the building, towards the busy streets of Ashton City, the tall man coldly spoke, Victor, has there been any news regarding the 2 people we sent to recruit that kid that caught my eye? No, we tried contacting them, but so far, we haven't heard from them yet. Standing a few feet away from the muscular man, a man dressed in a simple gray suit curtly replied. Hearing the reply, after a short pause, the tall man's brows furrowed. Strange. Noticing the guild master thinking, the gray suit individual asked, Guild master, what are your orders? Bang. Just as the guild master of Luxus, Patrick Reed, was about to speak, the sound of the door smashing reverberated across the space as an individual, wearing a black suit hurriedly ran into the room with a report in his hand. Emergency report. Young master has gotten into a conflict inside of a nightclub. Frowning, an invisible pressure instantly bore down on the individual that had just rushed into the room. KHHH. Thud. Feeling the pressure bearing down on him, the subordinate that had just barged into the office felt his knees give out as he knelt on the ground of the office space. Obviously angered by the sudden intrusion, Patrick coldly spat as he glanced at his subordinate. You better have a good reason for suddenly barging into my office like that. How is this piece of news deemed to be an emergency? Speak your next words carefully. Gulp. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, trembling, the individual started speaking. Why young master got into a conflict and, gulp. Hesitating, swallowing another gulp of saliva, the poor man continued, lowest an arm in the process. Vawawam. Bam. Instantly a tremendous pressure shrouded the whole office space as the furniture around the room was obliterated into dust. Papers flew everywhere, and the whole room shook. Trembling, Patrick looked towards the kneeling subordinate and slowly said, repeat what you said. Recount me everything carefully. Feeling Patrick's gaze on him, without a second thought, the subordinate nodded his head. Why yes. According to the report, Yunji Master Jacob got into conflict with Nolan Valdev, son of current guild master of Sword of Light. Frowning, the aura around Patrick slightly dissipated as he said, Sword of Light? Nolan? Continue. Repeating the words inside of his mind, nodding his head slightly, Patrick gestured for his subordinate to continue reading the report. Being told to continue, without a second thought, the subordinate instantly started speaking again. Why yes, according to the reports, as the two were in the middle of a conflict inside of the nightclub, out of nowhere, someone attacked Jacob. The result was his arm getting detached from his body. KHH. Once again, a massive overbearing pressure started emanating from Patrick's body. Oh, since when was Sword of Light that impulsive? To think they actually dared to make a move against their son. How daring of Sword of Light. It looks like Sword of Light didn't regard Luxus as an opponent. Clenching his fists tightly, Patrick turned towards Victor, who stood by the side and coldly said, immediately summon all of our high-ranking members. In a week's time, I want everything prepared. Prepare the paperwork. We are going to declare a guild war against Sword of Light. Shocked by the news, Victor's eyes opened wide as he couldn't help but exclaim, Guild Master. With an expressionless face, Patrick once again stared at the city below him. It doesn't matter if the opponent is another gold-grade guild. If you hurt my son, I'll make sure to return everything with interest. Tack. Placing my pawn down, I glanced at Small Snake and smiled as I spoke. And so the Guild Master of Luxus will most likely prepare for a guild war. Taken aback, Small Snake's hand, which was holding on to a pawn, paused. Looking at me, he couldn't help but ask, a guild war? Yes. Nodding my head, I confirmed. If everything went according to my predictions, as soon as the Guild Master of Luxus found out what had happened to his son, he would without a doubt start preparing for a guild war. This was inevitable. He only had one son. Now that he lost an arm, he, without a doubt, would instantly try to fight against the person responsible for crippling his son. And the only way he could do that was through a guild war. A guild war was something that the central government established to legally resolve conflicts between guilds. Because several conflicts between guilds in the past led to a lot of deaths, the central government had no choice but to establish guild wars as a mean to legally allow guilds to fight each other without suffering any casualties. This setup was specifically made to avoid deaths, as at the moment humanity could not afford to lose any more talented warriors. With the pressure coming from all sides, the more heroes they lost, the worse they would be. Therefore, after a lot of discussions, the central government set up a system called guild wars. In guild wars, like the name suggested, guilds would compete with each other, and this conflict would all be done inside of a virtual world. After investing billions and billions of you, the central government managed to create a state-of-the-art virtual machine that could replicate 99.99% of reality, the closest to reality to date. Through fighting in the virtual world, the guilds could compete against each other under fair rules without losing any member of their guild. The winner of the guild war would gain something that was agreed upon prior to engaging in a guild war. Moreover, with the central government acting as the intermediary there was no need to fear for the other party not holding up on the agreed terms. Are you really sure he's going to declare a guild war so suddenly? Small Snake, who was once again confused, looked at me and said, I mean, if the guild master wasn't stupid, he would instantly notice a few irregularities in the events that had happened in the nightclub. I mean, there are a lot of things that don't make sense if you think about it rationally. Smiling, I lazily yawned. You're spot on. After a bit of thinking, the guild master of Luxius, Patrick Reed, will instantly realize that something was wrong with the events that led to his son losing an arm. Nodding his head, Small Snake curiously glanced in my direction. If he realized that, wouldn't that mean your plan failed? Tack. Moving my queen a few squares diagonally, I smiled. Fail? No, that's exactly what I'm hoping will happen. Victor, pause everything that you've been doing. Frowning, after a couple of hours of deep thought, Patrick realized that something didn't add up with the report he received from the incident. He had let his emotions get the best of him because of how much he loved his son. As soon as he heard of what had happened to him, he immediately mobilized the guild into partaking in a guild war. He didn't even check the full details of the situation. Something just doesn't add up to this story. The heir of Sword of Light shouldn't be this impulsive. The more Patrick thought about it, the more the story didn't add up. There was no way the son of the current guild master of Sword of Light would be impulsive enough to suddenly resort to removing the limb off of a direct heir of another gold-graded guild. No, he was an elite trained since birth. There was no way he would be irresponsible to the point he would actively seek to fight against the whole guild directly. Yeah, this definitely didn't add up. As they were both heirs of gold-graded guilds, they should obviously know when to attack and when to retreat. Turning towards Victor, who was wearing the same gray suit as before, Patrick ordered, Victor, get someone to collect all of the reports regarding the incident. From eyewitnesses to cameras and anything that can be useful in getting a better idea of what happened. He was going to get a real look at what had happened. If he caught sight of anything remotely suspicious, he would immediately get to the bottom of it. He was not going to let someone who hurt his son get away with it. Guildmaster, everything regarding the incident is here. 30 minutes after issuing the order, Victor walked next to Patrick and handed him a tablet. Thank you. Taking the tablet, Patrick looked through the files and numerous footage. As he looked through the files, Patrick's expression would change from time to time. Click. Soon, after reviewing the data for an hour or so, he turned off the tablet and solemnly said, most likely, someone is trying to instigate a conflict between us. What? Standing next to Patrick, Victor couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Are you serious? Solemnly nodding his head, Patrick placed the tablet down on his desk. Yes, then we need to report this to Sword of Light. Maybe they know something regarding the situation. Freezing half-sentence, Victor's brows twitched as he recalled something. Actually, now that I recall, I remember hearing that young Master Jacob, in his rage, used the artifact that you had given him and almost crippled Nolan. Right now, according to the reports, he is bedridden with no signs of waking up. Without saying a word, Patrick fell into deep thought. It seems like both sides suffered losses. His son lost an arm, whilst Nolan, the heir of Sword of Light, also seemed to have been heavily injured. If Zach Valdev, the current guild leader of Sword of Light, didn't lose his mind, he too would have reached the same conclusion as him. Someone had instigated the conflict. Reaching this conclusion, Patrick's aura intensified. Now, I really am curious as to who's daring enough to mess with two gold-graded guilds. Glancing at Victor, in a deep voice, Patrick ordered, take all of the video evidence of the conflict and analyze it frame per frame. Don't miss anything. As long as something looks suspicious, immediately report it to me. There definitely might be something we overlooked. Nodding his head, Victor took the tablet and left the office. As you wish. Chapter 94. Knock, knock. 30 minutes after Victor left, Patrick heard someone knocking on his door. Come in. Entering the room, Victor bowed slightly and said, Guildmaster, as per your orders, we have looked through all of the camera footage from the night the incident happened. Pausing, looking at Patrick straight in the eyes, Victor solemnly said, we found something. Nodding his head, Patrick spoke, show me. Tapping on the holographic function of the tablet, a three-dimensional video replayed in front of Patrick. The camera angle pointed towards a rather secluded parking lot area near the nightclub. Pointing at the video, Victor said, in one of the video cameras, we managed to spot a suspicious individual exiting the venue right after the fight started. The most interesting part regarding that individual is that he was wearing a skin mask. Frowning, Patrick could not help but glance at Victor as he asked, a skin mask? That is indeed suspicious. Did you manage to find out his identity? Right now, he did not really care about the details. He just wanted to find the guy responsible for crippling his son. Nodding his head, using the holographic function of the tablet, a profile appeared before Patrick. We have managed to identify the identity of the masked man responsible for taking the young master's arm. With reference to the database from the system, we managed to identify the man as Patrick Marr. He is currently working as a manager for a construction firm not so far from here, and other than that there were no notable discoveries. However, once we dug further we were able to find a crucial piece of information. Pausing slightly, Victor looked at Patrick and slowly said, the company he is currently working for is a subsidiary of Bull's Wrath. Nodding his head from time to time as he heard Victor talk, pausing for a moment, as if something clicked inside his mind, Patrick fell into deep thought. Bull's Wrath, Bull's Wrath. I see. Repeating the name a couple of times, a trace of a smile appeared on his face. That indeed sounded suspicious. Bull's Wrath. If Patrick thought about it, the guild that would benefit the most out of Luxus fighting against Sword of Light would definitely be them. They too were a gold-graded guild, and compared to the other gold-graded guilds in the vicinity, they were the ones closest to both Sword of Light and Luxus. Moreover, both Luxus and Sword of Light had conflicts with Bull's Wrath. I see. As his thoughts paused there, the frown on his brows deepened. His instincts told him that Bull's Wrath were indeed the ones responsible for instigating the conflicts between Sword of Light and them. However, he did not have enough evidence. Just because the culprit worked for a subsidiary that was under Bull's Wrath control did not mean they were actually working for them. They could very well be hired mercenaries in disguise. This would mean that this was planned by someone else, and that they were trying to insinuate that Bull's Wrath was behind it. Just who is it? The more Patrick thought about it, the more questions emerged in his mind. Just who? If only he had more evidence. Knock, knock. Snapping Patrick out of his thoughts was the sound of someone knocking on the door. Regaining his usually cold bearing, Patrick coldly said, "Come in." Opening the door, wearing a black suit, an individual came in. "Master, we have received another report." "Tack. What did you do with the 2 guys you brought here last time?" Pausing for a moment, my hand froze for a split second. It took me a couple of seconds to understand what Small Snake was talking about. That is right. Small Snake was the one who helped me carry the bodies of the 2 individuals I met at Ryan's house. Them. Nodding his head, Small Snake asked once again, "Yeah, what did you do with them?" About that. They sort of escaped." "Ha, yep, they escaped. When I returned from my trip to Ryan's house, I brought them to a relatively isolated storage space and tied them up with a rope. I wanted to interrogate them and all, but, well, I had to go to the bathroom. By the time I returned, they were already long gone. Very negligent on my side." As I recounted what had happened, noticing Small Snake's darkening face, I coughed in embarrassment. I obviously did not let them go that easily. I am confident with regards to my knot tying skills, and honestly, I tried really hard to look for them. 10 minutes in, I had to give up as I really could not find them. Bam. Smashing my fist against the desk, I angrily spat. Damn. How could I have been so negligent? Sighing, Small Snake shook his head as he said, "Your acting is really terrible." Opening my eyes wide, a hurt look appeared on my face. Wiping the corner of my eye, I replied with an aggrieved tone, What are you talking about? Why are you coming at me like that, Small Snake? How could you belittle me like that?" Tack. Shaking his head, moving a pawn, Small Snake gestured for me to move. "Your move." Snorting, I replied, You changing the topic will not change the fact that I am pissed. Victor, contact the Guild Master of Sword of Light." "As you wish." With his hands interlocked behind his back, Patrick stared at the window of his office. To think Bull's Wrath was so audacious and ambitious enough to think that they could play the Oriole without getting caught. How audacious indeed. Smirking, Patrick could not help but think to himself. Their plan might have actually succeeded if not for the fact that they had been negligent on their end. Just moments prior, he received a report detailing the fact that 2 of his subordinates had just come back heavily injured. After healing them, they instantly recounted everything that had happened. From how they were trying to recruit Ryan, to suddenly finding themselves ambushed and how they miraculously escaped. For the most part, Patrick did not care. However, a certain section of the report intrigued him. I saw that the aggressor had an insignia of a bull with a cross inside of his sleeves. Bull with a cross. That was Bull's Wrath's insignia. From then, Patrick read the report more seriously and got a better idea of what had happened. Apparently, someone wearing Bull's Wrath insignia stopped them from recruiting the kid that they had a slight interest in. Although it did not prove that Bull's Wrath was responsible for the conflict, it was enough for Patrick. He did not believe in coincidences. He had already sent the information to Sword of Light. Now it was time to wait. He will definitely make them pay for what they have done. Tack. Moving one of the chess pieces on the board, Small Snake could not help but ask, "So basically you redirected everything you did to Bull's Wrath?" Tack. Nodding my head in confirmation, I moved another one of my chess pieces. Glancing at the board, apart from a few pieces, almost everything was gone. "Yeah, pretty much." Frowning, Small Snake asked, "Why Bull's Wrath though? Out of all the guilds he chose to use as a scapegoat, why Bull's Wrath?" He was genuinely curious. Smiling, whilst waiting for Small Snake to make a move, I said, "There are multiple reasons why I chose Bull's Wrath. Geographically they are the closest guild next to Sword of Light in Luxus. They hold a grudge with both Luxus and Sword of Light. They are famous for being overbearing and taking whatever they wanted." Pausing slightly, my eyes narrowed. "But out of all the reasons, the most important out of all points that I have just listed is that they too showed interest in Ryan, and you do not touch what I already set my eyes on." Nodding his head, Small Snake somewhat understood. Apart from the last point, everything he said was reasonable. Be it geographically, reputation-wise, and relationship-wise, Bull's Wrath was the ideal guild to put the blame on. That he did not disagree with. As his thoughts paused there, Small Snake could not help but be impressed. The level of detail in the plan was something that even he, someone who has seen a lot, could not help but be impressed with. Tack. Placing his piece down, Small Snake asked, "Can I ask you one more question?" "Go ahead." "What happens after Sword of Light and Luxus beat Bull's Wrath? Won't they just focus their attention back on Ryan then?" Hearing Small Snake's questions, a smile appeared on my lips. Shaking my head, I laughed. "Ha ha ha, you forgot something, Small Snake." Pausing, I slowly said, "Human greed is boundless. Even if Sword of Light and Luxus win, You did not forget that both of their heirs are currently heavily injured, right? Shaking his head, Small Snake said, no. Seeing that he was following, I continued. The alliance is merely temporary. By the time both guilds swallow Bull's wrath, they will soon both be at each other's throats fighting for what little remains of Bull's wrath as an excuse to weaken each other. Though on the surface it was an alliance, it was merely one made out of convenience. As soon as Bull's wrath was out of the picture, they will immediately fight against each other. By then, no matter who wins, they would be so busy fighting each other that years would have already passed. And during the time they were fighting, Ryan would already have been long forgotten by them. In the end, what I did was something that would have inevitably happened in the near future regardless of my interference. Ding. Stopping me mid-sentence, my phone rang. As soon as it did, a smile appeared on my face. Finally. Checking my phone, and confirming that it was indeed the message I was looking for, my smile deepened. Sword of Light and Luxious have jointly declared war against Bull's wrath. Tack. Moving my queen diagonally to the black king, I said, checkmate. Game over, white won. Staring at the chessboard that displayed the large U1 sign, I could not help but glance at Small Snake and say, do you not just love it when everything falls into place? Chapter 95. Currently, talking about the Northern District, Sword of Light and Luxious, two major gold-graded guilds, have officially declared a guild war against Bull's wrath. Although the reason for the sudden war is unknown, sources say that it has to do with the heirs of both respective guilds. Turning off the television, lazily sitting on my chair, I glanced at Small Snake. Small Snake, how is the stock market faring? With his eyes glued on two large monitors filled with numbers, Small Snake apathetically replied. Just as you predicted, Bull's Wrath's stock has declined hard. All right. Leaning back on my chair, I lazily nodded my head. Prior to everything that had happened, using all the money I had left, I shorted Bull's Wrath's stock. Knowing that their stock would plummet once Luxious and Sword of Light officially declared a guild war against them, I shorted their stock. And with that, I solved my money problem. So not only did I resolve the issues with Ryan, but I now also resolved the money situation that had been annoying me for the past week or so. In just one move, I managed to resolve two of the problems that had been bothering me lately. Like the saying goes, 2 birds with 1 stone. And honestly, I could not be more content with the result. Although I do have to point out the fact that what I did was definitely illegal. Yup. Well, as long as I do not get caught. You are not guilty until proven guilty. I will stick with that rationale for now. Now that you have sorted out Luxious, what about Ryan? Him. Yeah. Thinking for a moment, I half closed my eyes and lazily responded. Nothing really, we just wait for them to call. Taking his eyes off the monitors, Small Snake frowned as he glanced in my direction. Wait, you just went through all of this trouble to get rid of Luxious off of Ryan's back, and right after solving everything you suddenly start to become passive, what? Seriously looking at Small Snake, I nodded my head. Pretty much. I mean, it is not that I was being passive. It is just that I was that confident in what I proposed. Anyone with a sane mind would without a doubt agree to the terms I proposed. I mean, the terms I proposed were just too good to be turned down. Not only did I include a hefty sum of money as a salary for Ryan, I also included added benefits such as short working hours and free housing. What more could you ask for? Actually, looking back on the terms I proposed, my heart could not help but start bleeding. For a 12-year-old kid, I really did go overboard, but I do not regret it. It was worth the investment. Ah, wait, what if they thought it was a scam? Oh shit. Recalling the fact that my mercenary group was only rank I with no missions or accomplishments to its name, I slowly started frowning. Yeah, now that I thought about it carefully, without a doubt they might assume this might be a scam. Thinking thus far, my face could not help but darken. I miscalculated. Sigh. Staring at my continuously changing face, Small Snake could not help but sigh. I am not even going to ask about why your face is currently looking like that. My instincts are telling me to ignore you completely. Pausing, glancing at his watch, Small Snake could not help but say. Anyways, should you not be heading back home? Me? Why? Snapping me out of my thoughts, I frowned as I looked at Small Snake in confusion. Why would I go back home now? Did he want me to leave? Rolling his eyes and sighing once again, Small Snake said. Do you not have to return to the lock today? Bam. Throwing as many curses as I could muster, I quickly packed up everything that I could find on my desk and made a run for it. The fact that today was the day I was supposed to return to the lock completely slipped my mind. I was careless. Right. Stopping right before the entrance of the building, as my feet were jogging in place, looking at Small Snake I reminded him. Before I leave, make sure to contact Leopold. Since we made enough money from this ordeal, hiring him should not be a problem. In the meantime, since we are in the same school, I will take care of recruiting Ava, so just focus on recruiting him. Turning his attention back on the monitors, Small Snake nodded his head. On it. Alright, I think I have said enough. Gotta go. Contact me if you need anything. Without waiting for Small Snake's reply, I dashed out of the building. My family was probably already waiting at the train station. I could not afford to waste any more time. Ren, hurry up or you are going to miss the train. Komaing. Running towards the train platform, I heard my mother's shout coming from the other side of where I was, near the air train that I was supposed to board. Huff, huff, I made it. Quickly arriving in front of the doors of the train, with my arms on my knees, I heavily gulped for air. Approaching me, with Nola in her arms, my mother asked, Ren, why are you so late? Huff, huff, nothing really, I was just busy with work and stuff. Work. Ah, well, with the subsidiary and stuff. I was not lying. Because I was so busy dealing with the mercenary stuff, I completely forgot about the fact that today, I was returning to the lock. My 1-month holiday was finally over. Well, to call it a holiday would be an overstatement, as I was busy almost every day with the mercenary group and stuff. Not once did I properly rest. Good job. Nodding his head, my father smiled in appreciation. He was happy that me, his son, was taking what he had said seriously. Sigh, all right, but do not overdo it. Somewhat getting the gist of what had happened, my mother helplessly sighed. Putting Nola down and extending her arms in my direction, she said, "Give us a hug." All right. Smiling, I walked forwards and hugged everyone. This went on for a solid minute as they refused to release me from their clutches. Beep, beep, beep. Oh, it is time for me to go. Hearing the beeps coming from the train, signaling that it was about to depart, I finally freed myself from their hugs. Entering the train, I looked at my family once again. Smiling as I stared at them happily waving at me, I could not help but feel my heart grow warm. 1 month. Although short, I could not help but feel a bond as I stared at them. Most of the emotions probably came from the previous Ren, but I had a feeling that a part of it was also mine. As I stared at them, the image of my previous family started overlapping with theirs. A faint smile appeared on my lips. Thank you for everything. By Big Brother. Glancing at Nola, who was waving at me with a sad face, I smiled. Squatting down to her height, I could not help but say, "Nola, try saying my name, not Big Brother but Ren." Now that I was about to go, and was probably not going to see her for a while, I wanted for her to call me by my name at least once. She always referred to me as Big Brother, but never actually called me by my name. It is Big Brother Ren, say it. Big Brother R, MHH. Nodding her head, Nola tried to say it, but halfway through, her face could not help but scrunch up as she could not pronounce the R. Seeing her struggle, calmly nodding my head, I slowly repeated my name. Repeat with me, REN. Instantly my smile froze. My body shook along with my smile. With the most gentle voice I could muster, I carefully said, "Nola, it is Ren with an R. Do not forget the R, okay, ha." Clank. Right before I could finish, the doors to the train started closing, sending me into a panic. No, I cannot be having this. Damn it, doors, do not close now. Bam, bam, bam. In desperation, I started pounding at the door as I looked at Nola, who was cheerfully smiling and waving at me. Through the gap of the closing doors, I shouted, "Nola, it is Ren with an R. Do not forget the R." Actually, anything other than Ben is okay too. Waving, Nola smiled and said, "By Big Brother Ben." Clank. Destination, Central District Lock. Bam, bam, bam. Pounding at the door with all my might, I screamed as the train slowly picked up its speed. No, Nola, no. Hey, can you keep it down? Can you not see that there are other people here? Just as I was in the midst of my despair, an annoyed voice resounded from the back of the train. Standing up, a beautiful young girl with short auburn hair glared in my direction. "I was trying to sleep when you're shouting suddenly. Shut it, lady, I am in a life and death." Just as we were both about to shout at each other, turning around and seeing each other's faces, we froze. After a solid couple of seconds of silence, I could not help but break the silence. Just why? Just why in the world was Emma standing in front of me? Chapter 96. Well, I somehow managed to recover from the mental damage I received earlier, but as if the fact that my little sister couldn't pronounce my name was enough, I suddenly found myself on the same train as Emma. Yeah, Emma Rochefield, one of the main protagonists and daughter of the mayor of Ashton City. Sigh. To make things worse, she was now sitting next to me with both of her eyes closed, seemingly asleep. It felt as if I was sitting on needles. Shut up. An hour into the train ride, I couldn't help but yawn. But to Emma, who was sitting next to me, my seemingly quiet yawn instantly caused a reaction from her. The reason for her outburst was most likely due to the fact that she was looking for an excuse to pick a fight with me from the very beginning. And as soon as she saw the opportunity, she shot back at me. I guess she still held a grudge against me for what I did to Jin. Couldn't blame her though. I would show a similar reaction if I found one of my friends suddenly being held by the throat. Not that I had any, maybe small snake, but in all honesty I would probably laugh first. Briefly glancing at her, rolling my eyes, I retorted, "What? That is your 8th yawn. You counted? Who in the world would count how many times someone yawned? That is not normal. I can tell what you are thinking. No, I don't have the habit of counting when someone yawns, but it is different when every time you yawn you stretch and nudge all the way over to my side. Makes sense. That indeed sounded like something I would do. Sorry, you should be. Since I was in the wrong, I rightfully apologized. But after hearing her response, I started regretting it. In the end, I didn't say anything else and just leaned back on my chair. Wasn't worth the hassle. That was my original train of thought, however. As the train ride continued, I couldn't help but frown. Noticing my change in attitude, Emma angrily asked, "What?" I had originally planned to ignore her and wait for the train to smoothly arrive at the lock after noticing her grumpy mood. But a thought suddenly occurred to me. Glancing at her, I asked, "Hey, why are you taking the train? How is that any of your concern?" Smiling, unbothered by her sharp response, I said, "You didn't forget, did you?" "Forget what?" As she spoke, each of her words was covered in thorns, almost as if she was suppressing herself from lashing out at me. Pretending to be oblivious to it, I lazily said, that you owe me one. Though she still looked angry, her mouth could not help but shut. She was at a loss for words. No matter how much she wanted to rebuke, no words came out of her mouth. She knew I was right. That is that and this is. I guess your life is only worth that much. Fair enough. GHHH. Fine. Backed into the corner, Emma could only angrily stomp her feet on the ground. She, like Amanda, didn't like to owe others favors, and thus after I reminded her of the fact that I had saved her life, she could only lower her head in defeat. Sulking, she said, "What do you want to know?" Smiling inwardly, once again, I asked, "Why are you taking the train?" Though my question seemed random and intrusive, there was a very specific reason why I asked her this. Emma was rich. Let me rephrase. Emma Rochefield was filthy rich. So rich that she could probably buy my parents' guild 100 times over with her allowance alone. This meant that she did not have to take the train to get to the lock. No, in fact. Considering how doting her father was, there was no way that she would be allowed to take a train to the lock. Moreover, as I looked around her, she did not have any bodyguards around protecting her. This was something that her father would normally never allow. And if my hunch was correct, this meant one thing. In short, my father is currently not in Ashton City, and my uncle told me to take the train back to the lock. I see. As I suspected. Though I ignored most of what she said, my ears picked up an important piece of information. Father not in Ashton City, and uncle told me to take the train back to the lock. Though she did not go into detail, I already knew who her uncle was. Theodore Rochefield, the second in command in the Rochefield household, and Emma's illegitimate uncle. Also the main antagonist of the Emma route. The route which causes her to fall in love with Kevin. Problem was, this event, according to my calculations, shouldn't have started until a further 2 months from now. A month after the midterms. This meant that the timeline has changed. Frowning, I couldn't help but once again realize that the plotline had been distorted. The real question this time was it my fault, or was something beyond my grasp manipulating the story from the dark? Could it perhaps be the one who sent me to this world? If so, what was their goal, and why me? In the end, for the remainder of the train ride, I sat in my seat immersed in my own thoughts, completely forgetting about the fact that Emma was sitting next to me. "Ryan, why are you looking at those files?" "Nothing, I was just curious." Inside a rundown apartment, a young boy was carefully looking through a stack of files. As he read through the files, his eyes could not help but wander towards the TV. The news channel was on, currently, talking about the Northern District. Sword of Light and Luxius, two major gold-graded guilds, have officially declared a guild war against Bull's Wrath. Although the reason for the sudden war is unknown, sources say that it has to do with the heirs of both respective guilds. So it was you. Despite his features looking like that of a 12-year-old, his eyes and expression had no resemblance to that of a 12-year-old child. As his eyes alternated between the TV and the files in his hand, a faint smile appeared on his lips. Recalling the events that had happened a couple of days prior, Ryan could not help but think back at the moment where the youth with blue eyes and black hair had come over and got rid of the two people sent from Luxius. He didn't think much back then, because he was too preoccupied with his mother. But after news of Luxius suddenly declaring a guild war reached his ears, Ryan couldn't help but notice that something did not add up. The timing. It was exactly a couple of days after he saw the black-haired youth taking those two guys from Luxius back with him. Ryan's initial impression of the black-haired youth wasn't all that great. That is because of what he saw on his sleeve. Regardless of what was happening, Ryan was still paying attention to every little detail around him. At first, Ryan did in fact, just like the two guys from Luxius, also think that the black-haired youth was from Bull's Wrath, primarily due to how he was able to see the insignia hidden beneath his sleeves. But as he read through the papers regarding his mercenary group, Ryan instantly understood everything that had happened. Moreover, as he looked at the TV, Ryan could more or less determine that everything had been that youth's doing. Or at least he played a part in it. Interesting. It didn't take long for him to get a clear picture of what he did. From how he instigated Luxius and Sword of Light to fight, to how he was able to pin all of the blame on Bull's Wrath. Ryan too came up with a similar plan. In fact, he had many more complicated plans which took less time and were more efficient. But all of his plans carried a couple of critical flaws disabling him from carrying them out. His inability to fight and his mother. With those two factors holding him back, he couldn't find any way to get rid of the troubles that had been coming his way. No matter how much he wanted to put them into action, with his not even G-ranked stats, his plans would never work. He was simply too weak. Thus he could only give up and helplessly be put into situations that stressed his mother. He hated that. He hated his own powerlessness. He would always wake up at night cursing at God for giving him a smart brain, but no abilities to go along with his brain. Especially since this was a world where strength meant everything. His intelligence and brilliance was hence often overlooked. Flip, flip, flip. Looking through the ridiculous offer that was presented before him, Ryan couldn't help but be tempted. The deal was much better compared to the one offered to him by Luxius. In fact, it was leagues better. Free housing, good salary, short working hours. It was the ideal job. Moreover, remembering how hard his mother was working every day to feed him, Ryan found himself on the verge of signing this paper. However, he stopped himself halfway through. He was too impulsive. He needed to observe more, he needed to understand more, and thus after a short while of thinking Ryan decided that he wouldn't sign the papers, at least not until he determined whether they were trustworthy or not. He couldn't take any chances. Ryan, time for dinner. Hearing his mother calling for him, as if a switch had been flipped, a childish expression appeared on his face. Happily smiling, he shouted, "I'm coming, Mom." Chapter 97. Clink. Bastard. 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 Entering her dorm, Emma furiously threw her stuff on her bed. Her mood couldn't be any worse. How dare you ignore me like that? This was the first time she felt so disrespected. Throughout her whole train ride to the lock, she sat next to the one guy she was most curious about. The guy whom she suspected saved her life back in Hallberg, and she wasn't wrong. He brazenly admitted this fact when he rubbed it all over her face. Just recalling the smirk he had on his face as he openly admitted that fact irked her to no end. Although this annoyed her, it wasn't what truly irritated her. No. What irritated her was the fact that he had completely ignored her after she had answered his question. No matter what she did, he wouldn't respond nor acknowledge her existence. Almost as if she was nothing but air. GHHHHH. Just thinking about it irritated her even further. She would definitely not forget this. Ren Dover. Ren Dover. That was his name. Clenching her jaw, Emma swore to herself. You better make sure that the next time I see you I'm not in a bad mood else. Achoo. Is someone thinking about me? Rubbing my nose, I couldn't help but feel like someone was talking behind my back, and I was pretty sure I wasn't overthinking things. In the first place, with my current body, normal flus shouldn't be affecting me. After thinking for a bit, I just shrugged it off. Meh, who cares? I have other things to worry about. Like training. With exams starting next week, the training center was filled to the brim with students. It was to the point that in order for me to get a decent workout, I had to train late into the night. Hew. Yay. The heavy and tired shouts coming from the training dummies' sparring areas echoed throughout the whole center. The residual magic power from the spars swept throughout the halls, creating a thick and dense atmosphere. In the gym area of the training center, students could be seen lifting 150 kilograms dumbbells effortlessly, almost as if they were just holding onto their phones. I too tried lifting dumbbells. However, what I could do was pitiful compared to other students. This was mainly due to the fact that the people next to me were muscleheads. Like, each of their biceps was about the same size as my head. Ridiculous. Weeing. Uke. Using my phone's vibration as an excuse to stop training, I put down the bar I was lifting. Dizziness immediately came over me as I felt my chest become numb. It seemed 190 kilograms bench press was still too much for my current self. Sitting up straight, I wiped my sweat off with a towel hanging around my neck. I then proceeded to check my phone. The documents are ready. But are you really planning on going through with the terms you've offered to Leopold? It was a message from Small Snake. It looks like Small Snake has already made contact with Leopold. That's good. I wasn't worried about him not accomplishing the mission, as I fully knew the extent of his abilities. With how well-connected and intelligent he was, recruiting Leopold shouldn't be a problem. Now I only needed to wait for Ryan. I was sure he was already contemplating my offer. With just a little bit of time, he would definitely come along. With regards to Ava, now that I was back in the lock, I could easily take care of her. Everything needed time though. I wasn't quite going to approach her yet. I first needed to pass the midterms. This was a far more pressing issue, as the results could determine my future. You see, I set myself a goal for the upcoming midterms. Top 100. Yes, I didn't misspeak. Top 100. There were several reasons as to why I set my goal to be that high, but it primarily boiled down to two reasons. My first goal was to facilitate recruitment of people whom I want to join my mercenary group. My second goal was to buy time for my parents. The first point was self-explanatory. Who would want to join someone's mercenary group when the current leader of the group was only ranked 1550 in the lock? It just didn't make sense. I mean, in all fairness, if someone ranked 1550 approached me and tried to recruit me, I'd probably laugh at their face. Though I doubt Ava was the type of person to do that, she wasn't the only person I wanted to recruit. If I reached the top 100, recruiting people that I wanted would definitely be much easier. The second reason, well, if I reached the top 100, my family could use this to stop the advances coming from the opposition. Not fully stop them, but slow down. With me reaching such a high rank, my parents could definitely use this as leverage when talking to the board members. But well, I knew that their talk wouldn't go anywhere as my talent was assessed as D rank after all. To them, regardless of how outstanding I was destined to never go beyond D rank. Well, at least that was what was written on paper. In reality, I had no talent cap, let alone S rank. I could easily go even beyond SS rank, higher than the current top leaders of humanity. Pausing my thoughts, I frowned. Matthew will definitely be not pleased about this development, but well, it shouldn't be a problem as of yet. I knew he wouldn't move until my parents' guild was fully taken, and with that, I probably bought myself another couple of months. Moreover, with me currently being in the lock, he couldn't even vent his frustrations on me. This was ideal as I really didn't want to go through another annoying situation where old Ren would take over. Plus, the more time I had, the more I could prepare for my trip outside of Earth. By the time I returned, the curse taking over my parents would no longer be a threat, and old Ren's influence would no longer haunt me. Actually, with regards to the trip, I have to talk to Kevin, don't I? I mean, he was the only person that could go out of Earth whenever he wanted, all thanks to the system he had. With his system, he could travel to any planet he wanted, but it didn't come cheap. Depending on how far he wanted to travel, he had to use a monster core. This alone prevented him from going very far, as they were all rare and expensive. Plus, considering the place that I wanted to go, I estimated that I needed to find at least a D-ranked core. Damn it. Buying it was definitely not an option. I mean, I'd have to have at least 100 million U, and that's with no one making a bid for it. If only the planet the cure was located in wasn't that far off from Earth. In the end, that was only wishful thinking on my end. Just the fact that I didn't need AC rank or above core was enough for me to thank the heavens. If it was really above D rank, I may as well just give up. I mean, regardless of how much money I saved up, there was no way I could afford to purchase such high-leveled core in that short of a time frame. It just wasn't something I could do even with stocks. Either way, the planet I needed to go to was called Amura, a planet that used to be inhabited by the orcs. Well, that was until the demons came and took over. Though it wasn't considered their main planet, it was still considered an extremely important planet for them, as it was the planet with the most fertile soil, meaning that it was the planet where most of the orcs' food was made. The place was fraught with danger, and if by the time I went there I wasn't at least E-ranked, I stood no chance at surviving. That's how dangerous the place was. Dangers aside, I had another problem. How was I going to ask Kevin to bring me there? It's not like I could go to him and say, "Hey Kevin, my good pal, I want to go to Amura, so bring me there." How did I know you could travel to different planets? What a silly question. I am your creator after all. Yeah, not happening. Ding, ding. Disrupting me from my thoughts was the loud sound of the alarm I set on my phone. I guess it's time for me to head back. It was already 10 p.m. signaling that it was time for me to wrap up with what I was doing and go to sleep. I determined that for me to be in optimal conditions each day, I had to sleep at least 8 hours a day, especially since the midterms were now right in the corner. In the morning I would study, and in the afternoon and night, I would train my body. That was my current lifestyle. Couldn't say I liked it, but, well, I needed the good grades, especially since I had a goal to accomplish. Thus, I went back to the dorm. With regards to the Kevin situation, I'll figure it out after the exams. I still had 4 months to prepare after all. Chapter 98. The sound of scribbling pencils rang out in the classroom. Almost all of the students present were hard at work preparing for the upcoming written exams. Arg, why do we have to go through this when we don't actually use this stuff in real life? Of course, there was bound to be at least 1 or 2 students who hated studying. But well, what he said did make sense. Most of the stuff we learned wasn't even useful for those of us who didn't plan on pursuing such a career path. Exams are next week. Study hard, or you're going to have regrets when the results come out. Turning around, a student replied, Yeah, it's not like you'd understand my struggles. Being reprimanded, the student that complained could only grumble to himself as he went back to studying. In the end, it seems like he was just venting out his stress. Lightly glancing at the duo, I shook my head. Regardless of what world you were in, there would always be a guy who hated studying and a guy who loved studying. I was neither. I didn't dislike studying nor did I love it. I just studied for the sake of it. Well, that was what I initially thought. However, looking at the question that was presented before me, I couldn't help but slowly start leaning towards the no studying group. Suppose a D-ranked monster, metal-fanged Magelodon, attacked you in the middle of the ocean. How much force do they exert each time they bite? And point out their weak points on the diagram below. Extra point. What is the primary sin flow of the metal-fanged Magelodon? And what is the fastest speed it can reach underwater? I was stumped. I had no clue where to start. Was this really going to be on the exam? I don't even remember writing about this monster inside of the novel. I mean, there were so many monsters that I had to remember that I could barely even think straight at this point. I understand that they want us to learn this in case we actually met this monster in combat so that we would be able to deal with them accordingly if the situation presented itself. But with current technology, finding the information about the monster shouldn't be hard at all. Just a quick cross-reference with the monster encyclopedia in the app, and all the information would be presented before me. Well, in all fairness, I guess it did help in situations where the phone couldn't be taken out or that there was no battery left on the phone. Damn it, world. If you're going to write questions regarding monsters, at least make it so that I knew something regarding them. Don't give me questions on relatively unknown monsters. Ruins the whole point of me being the author, and using that as an advantage. Ding dong. In the midst of my rant, at that moment, the bell rang signaling the end of the class. The class was technically a review class, but in reality, it was just a self-study class, as there was no professor supervising the students. In any case, as soon as the bell rang, almost all of the students got up from their seats and left the class. It was evident that the majority hated studying. I, of course, planned to follow them back to the dorm. What was the point of studying in a classroom when you had no friends? In the end, apart from Kevin and a couple of other people, everyone left the class. And like that, it was the day of the exams. Surprisingly, I wasn't nervous. Apart from the fact that an artificial lake appeared beneath my feet, I really showed no sign of nervousness. Hey, man, did you cram all night? Yeah, I didn't sleep the whole night. How do you think you'll do? Not sure. Hopefully, I'll pass. Listening to the people besides me conversing, the butterflies in my stomach intensified. I didn't cram, not because I didn't want to, but from past experiences, I always tended to perform badly when I crammed. Just wasn't something that worked for me. 7:55 a.m. Glancing at my watch, I knew that I had 5 minutes left before the exam. A long line had already started forming by the entrance of the classroom. In front of them, a professor holding onto a tablet patiently waited for the students before doing the register. Fidgeting with my hands, I nervously looked around in hopes of finding something to distract myself from the wait. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. If only I had something that could help me determine what was going to be on the test. Pausing my thoughts, my eyes shot wide open. Hold up. Why didn't I think of this before? Quickly rummaging through my bag, I took out a thick red book. Flip, flip, flip. Without skipping a beat, I flipped through the pages of the book. State the theory of unbounded monster relativity. Write down the proof as well. As Kevin looked through the papers, without pause, he quickly compiled the answers on the white answer sheet in front of him. What degree of control would someone need in order to determine the circulatory flow of their sin link in their body? How much was the link? Kukuku. Looking through the red book, I couldn't help but find myself laughing hysterically, almost like an evil dictator that had successfully completed his plan. Instantly all of my worries washed away. Cross-referencing with my phone, I quickly memorized everything that I could memorize in that short time frame. It seems like the world had finally taken pity on me. I now had a proper shot at getting a good grade. Student ranked 1550 Ren Dover. 5 minutes on the dot, the professor called for me. Helpless, I could only put the book and phone away and say, present. With that, I entered the exam hall, and as I did, I couldn't help but be reminded of the hellish days when I had to enter the exam rooms back in my previous world. How did you think you did? I think it was all right. I'm confident in my chances of passing. I got a question on Valdev's law. I seriously forgot about it. You got that? I got a question on Zlorov's law. Staring at the students happily conversing as they left the class, a defeated smile appeared on my lips. Every step I took felt as if a solid thick piece of lead was stuck on them. I miscalculated once again. Just when I thought the world was finally answering my prayers, it went and fucked me over like never before. Turns out every student had different questions. Yeah. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Fortunately, I somehow managed to answer all of the questions. However, because I was caught off guard, I lost some valuable time. Now I really had to pray for a passing grade. If I didn't, I'd have to redo the test again later in the summer. And honestly, I wasn't too keen on doing that, especially since I had a lot of things I needed to accomplish. Sigh. In the end, after letting out a long and exhausted sigh, I went back to my dorm. The midterms were far from over. I still had to prepare for the upcoming practical exams. Fortunately, unlike with the theoretical exams, I knew what the next exams were about, dungeons. Yeah. We had to do a solo run of the school dungeon. The test scores were based on the time it took for students to complete the run. The faster the run, the higher the score. Unsurprisingly, in the novel, Kevin and Jin took the top spot, with timing that went along the lines of 1 hour and a couple of minutes, a far contrast to the average of the other runners that took approximately 2 to 4 hours. True Monsters. Chapter 99. Beep, beep. In a remote area of the academy, standing in front of a large portal, a group of students nervously stared at the professor before them. Students, please form a single line. As the professor spoke, a thick wave of residual magical energy emanated from the blue portal that was a few meters behind him. Though it wasn't overbearing, it still caused every student present to feel some form of pressure. The Cave of Everbloom. That was the name of the dungeon in front of us. It was a multi-layered dungeon, meaning that it had different levels of difficulty, with the highest being C rank, and the lowest being G rank. Because of how the dungeon had different levels, the Lock desperately fought for the ownership of the dungeon. It was the perfect place to train students. With the dungeon having the same layout regardless of the level of difficulty, it was a perfect dungeon to assess students' performance. Moreover, it was also capable of fairly assessing students, regardless of their rank. If you were G ranked, you would have to enter the dungeon in G difficulty, and so on with higher ranks. This way, there was no element of unfairness as the monsters and layout were the same with each dungeon difficulty. Thus, in reality, this test was used to assess a student's combat ability, rather than talent. Alright everyone, please pay close attention to what I am saying, as safety always comes first. Standing by the side of the portal, gathering everyone's attention back to himself, the professor spoke. Standing behind me is the dungeon that will be used for your practical exam for the midterms. The dungeon, as most of you know, is called the Cave of Everbloom, and it is our academy's own dungeon. Pausing and staring at the students before him, the professor continued. For your practical assessment, in order for you to pass, all you have to do is get to the other side of the dungeon. Simple as that, just crossing over is considered a pass. However, for your grade, you will be assessed on 2 things. Raising 2 of his fingers, the professor's tone became stern. Time taken for you to reach the end of the dungeon, and how many monsters you kill throughout the raid. For each extra monster you kill, you will be given an extra point and so on. Pausing once again to make sure that everyone understood, after a couple of seconds, the professor continued. There will be 3rd and 2nd years hidden inside of the dungeon. This is so that in case you find yourself in trouble, they can quickly come to your aid. This is a safety precaution that the school has done to make sure none of you die. Looking at the students before him, the professor's voice turned grave. However, be warned. If the 2nd and 3rd years are forced to make a move, you will either have points deducted from your overall score, or you will automatically fail the exam. So don't think that just because your life isn't in danger you shouldn't put the effort in the raid. If you're negligent, that's your score gone. Gulp. Finished with what he wanted to say, the professor noticed a lot of students swallowing a mouthful of saliva. It was evident that most of them were nervous. Not minding it, as he was used to such situations, the professor took out a transparent orb from his dimensional space and presented it before everyone. This orb here will measure your current rank. So once I call your name, please put your hand on the sphere. Soon after the sphere measures your rank, you will be assigned to your respective dungeon difficulty. Standing a couple of meters away from the professor, my eyes were drawn towards the orb the professor was holding. The orb of identification. It was a special artifact that measured someone's rank. It was created through the usage of an old dried-up monster core and essentially measured someone's rank through the flow of mana. I won't go too much into detail with regards to how it measures the stats of a person, but in short, depending on rank, the orb will shine different colors. G. Blue. F. Yellow. E. Green. D. Red. C. Pink. Those were the respective colors that represented a person's rank. Anything above C rank required a different measuring tool, as the orb of identification was merely a tool that measured an approximate rank of a person. It wasn't actually very accurate. Holding onto a black tablet, the professor's stern voice resounded across the space. Student rank 1. Kevin Voss, please step up. Called up, Kevin slowly walked in the direction of the professor. Arriving before the orb, Kevin looked at the professor and asked, "Do I put my hand on the orb?" "Yes." Nodding his head, under every student's anticipated gaze, Kevin placed his hand on the orb. Vuyuyum. Unsurprisingly, as soon as Kevin placed his hand on the orb, a tremendous red hue enveloped the surroundings. D rank. That is what the red color symbolized. A rank that no first year should ever come close to, at least not until the end of the first year. Looking around, I could see every student present staring at Kevin's back in shock. Surprisingly, the calmest person was actually Jin, who didn't seem to care about the fact that Kevin was deranked. I was honestly pleasantly surprised by this development. Normally Jin would have already been clenching his jaw and glaring at Kevin like there was no tomorrow. But it seems like he really did change, as Kevin told me back in Hallberg. Done. Soon after Kevin removed his hand from the orb, silence prevailed in the surroundings. Everyone was looking at him in utter shock, the professor included. After a couple of seconds, recovering from the shock, the professor spoke. D rank, student Kevin Voss will go to the D rank section of the dungeon. Not minding the attention he was getting, Kevin nodded towards the professor and headed back to where the students were. Staring at Kevin's figure for a couple of seconds, snapping out of his daze, the professor looked at his tablet and continued. Student rank 2, Melissa Hall, please step up. Student rank 3, Jin Horton, please step up. And so, like that, everyone's rank was measured. Apart from Melissa, whose rank was F, Jin, Amanda, and Emma were respectively assigned towards the graded difficulty of the dungeon. Rank 1550, Ren Dover, please step up. Finally, it was my turn. Not minding the stares coming from certain individuals, I walked up to the professor, who was holding onto the orb. Please put your hand on the orb. Nodding my head, I slowly placed my palm on the orb. Vuyuyum. As soon as I placed my hand on the orb, I felt a weird suction force coming from the orb. Soon after, without me needing to do anything, the mana inside of my body circulated. A couple of seconds after the mana inside of my body circulated, a green hue enveloped the surroundings. However, a couple of seconds after the green hue appeared on the orb, it was replaced by a pale yellow hue. Just moments before the hue turned yellow, as soon as the green hue enveloped the place, some of the people around me couldn't help but gasp in shock. It had to be noted that green symbolized E rank. For me, a relatively unknown person, to suddenly show up with E rank stats would definitely surprise everyone. However, the green hue soon turned yellow, indicating that I was F ranked. Because this wasn't the first time this event happened, everyone quickly recovered from the shock, allowing me to sigh in relief. It seems like the orb liked to play tricks on me. Frowning slightly, the professor shook his head and said, Student Ren Dover, please make your way towards the F area. All right. Nodding towards the professor, I headed back towards where the students were gathered. Fortunately, because the device was not very accurate, it could only measure a relative approximation of my rank, meaning that people only knew that I was F ranked, but not whether I was F-, F, or F+. And I liked for it to be that way. Though me reaching F- was still sort of unreasonable, it was still not as unrealistic as me reaching F+, especially since I was ranked G- a couple of months ago. This was good. Though I had gathered more attention towards myself, it was still not a bad idea for me to make people think that I was weaker than I actually was. This way, I could still make people underestimate me. Unlike Kevin, who brazenly showed everyone he had reached D rank. Thinking back, I think it was from this point on that he truly started being targeted by the likes of Gilbert and other jealous students. Tisk. This was exactly why I didn't like to expose my strength. Too much trouble. Chapter 100. 1, 2, 3, 8, 15, 23, 47, 53. Counting the students present in the line designated for the F-ranked students, the professor quickly scribbled something onto the tablet in his hand and lightly mumbled to himself. That's a significant increase compared to last year's batch. Nodding his head in satisfaction, putting the tablet away, in a stern tone, the professor spoke up. All right, all of the 53 students in the F-level difficulty, please listen up. As I have already explained the rules before, I won't go into too much detail with regards to what you need to do. However, I do have to remind you that you will all be sent to the same dungeon at the same time. Meaning that, yes, you can cooperate with one another. We won't stop you from collaborating with someone since, in real dungeons, such situations often occur. Pausing slightly, the professor squinted his eyes and his voice turned serious. And yes, with the fact that you can collaborate with the other students, it also means that you can also interfere with another person's progress. After all, the person who reaches first also gets an additional bonus point. So, not only do you have to watch out for the monsters inside of the dungeon, but you also have to watch out for the people next to you. Pausing and glancing at all of the students before him, smirking slightly, the professor said, "You better watch out. In dungeons, no rules exist. What may seem like your teammate moments before can quickly turn and backstab you when you least expect it. Such situations aren't very rare occurrences inside of dungeons. With dungeons being places that had no cameras, situations where your ally would betray you as soon as the chance presented itself wouldn't be all that surprising, especially if something tempted them into doing so." As the professor's words flowed through everyone's ears, all the students present took a step away from the person near them. Their eyes were full of vigilance. Human greed was boundless. You never know what would happen if you weren't alert. Glancing at the students who were now wary of each other, a satisfied smile appeared on the professor's face. "Enough of that. I'm going to go brief the other students now. You have 5 minutes to prepare yourselves. If you're planning on choosing a teammate, you better choose yours carefully, by now." Finished with what he wanted to say, turning off his tablet, the professor headed towards the next group. Watching the professor leave, with his arms crossed, Arnold glanced at the students beside him. Immediately disdain appeared on his face. None of them were worthy of teaming up with him. In fact, he didn't need to team up with anyone. Arnold was confident no one would be able to beat him. That's how confident he was in his abilities. To him, no one was a competitor. As he was looking at the students, Arnold's eyes soon paused on a certain individual. Snorting to himself, Arnold couldn't help but clench his fists. Humph, to think that Bug has also reached the F rank. Although Arnold was currently F rank, he found it unbelievable that the student he had previously disdained had reached a similar level to his in a mere 2 months. Especially since he had promised young Master Jin, before that he would have taken care of him. Time was almost up. Frowning, Arnold couldn't help but recall young Master Jin's odd behavior. He was much nicer than he had ever been in the past. He would no longer beat him to vent out his bad mood, nor was he spoken to as if he was someone beneath him. He almost treated him like an equal. Thinking thus far, Arnold couldn't help but feel his heart thumping in excitement. Acknowledged. That is how the current Arnold felt. He felt that the current Jin had finally acknowledged his hard work and dedication. All of his hard work had finally paid off. Jin now finally treated him like someone who was worthy of following him. Staring at Ren in the distance, Arnold couldn't help but recall the conversation he had with Jin 2 months prior, before Hallberg. At how Jin wanted him gone. Yes, since Jin had asked for it, now that he had been acknowledged, he must use anything within his power to satisfy Jin. Be it kneeling down, washing his clothes, to cleaning up bugs, he was prepared to do it. Arnold was prepared to do anything that was asked of him. Staring at Ren in the distance, Arnold licked his lips. You must pay a price for offending someone you shouldn't have. Picking my ear with my pinky, I noticed a couple of stares coming in my direction. Honestly, I couldn't be bothered to check who they were from. My mind was already focused on what was to come. According to what I remembered writing in the novel, this dungeon was located in a cave-like setting, meaning that there wasn't much room to maneuver the body freely. Moreover, the visibility inside of the dungeon was also low. I still vividly remember writing this part of the novel, hence why I knew a lot of what was to come. With Kevin being D rank, the level of difficulty was on a much harder level. Though I didn't know the full layout of the dungeon as I never delved too deeply into it, I knew what monsters were present, their weak points, and where the traps were located. This was good. Thinking thus far, I started thinking about what else I could do to optimize my score. I think drifting steps would definitely give me an edge compared to the other students. However, there was a problem. I needed to kill monsters with drifting steps, because the speed increased as time progressed. If each time I ran, I killed a monster, I would definitely lose all the momentum I had gathered, especially since I couldn't kill whilst running at extreme speeds. This meant that I would lose a lot of momentum every time I killed a monster, which was not good. It also had to be noted that drifting steps was still not in the minor realm of mastery, meaning that I wasn't very adept at using this skill. This further complicated things. I also had to take into account the fact that I wasn't confident in my written score. With me having wasted a lot of time, I wasn't too sure on how high of a score I could get. I definitely had to score high on this exam. Thus not killing monsters wasn't an option. What do I do? Alright, everyone please pay attention to me. Snapping me out of my thoughts was the loud shout coming from the professor. I will now open the portal. Once you enter, you will automatically be transported towards your designated post. At the entrance of the dungeon, there will be another instructor that will give you some equipment and another short briefing on what to do and what not to do. Pausing, glancing at every student present, the professor's tone became incomparably grave. Please make sure you listen to whatever they say as it may save your life. No human is perfect. We may not be able to save you on time, thus you must listen carefully to what they tell you as it might save your life. Glancing at every student present to make sure they understood, the professor nodded. Have a nice trip. Finished with what he wanted to say, glancing towards a staff member wearing a black lock uniform on the right. The professor nodded in his direction. Nodding back, the staff member pulled a lever. Vuyuyum. Right after the lever was pulled, the glow around the portal intensified, as the residual magical power being emitted from the portal quadrupled in magnitude. The air around us solidified due to how thick the mana in the air was. Staring at the massive portal before him, the professor moved to the side and gestured towards a certain group not so far from where I was. G ranks first. Vuyum, Vuyum, Vuyum. On cue, after seeing the portals light up, the students standing in line for the G-ranked section entered the portal one by one. As I stared at the students entering the portal, I couldn't help but notice how their group was much bigger compared to the other groups. It seems like there were a lot of G-ranked students present. Like that, for the next 5 minutes, students would enter the portal one by one in a single line. Looks like everyone entered. Please change the dungeon level. After making sure that every student had entered the portal, glancing towards the left, the professor gestured towards the staff member on his right to once again switch the dungeon grade. Nodding his head, the staff member once again pulled the lever. Vuyuyuyuyum. Soon after, the blue hue surrounding the portal intensified. The air around the portal further thickened, and solid threats of mana slowly sank their way into the portal. It was obvious that the portal difficulty increased. Without glancing at the portal, the professor glanced towards his tablet and said, F ranks, off you go. Vuyum, Vuyum, Vuyum. Right after his words entered the students' ears, one by one, the F-ranked students entered the portal. Fuo. Glancing at the students who were entering the portal, taking a deep breath, and staring at the large portal before me, I too stepped into the portal. Vuyum. Let's get this over with. To be continued. Hope you liked today's video. Join the community by subscribing and dropping a like. I'll be back with another update as soon as possible. See you then.